Thank you, members. Good evening, members, officers and members of the public. Can I welcome you to this Planning Committee meeting of the 15th of March. Just to remind you that we are being live streamed as I speak, but if you want to see yourselves on telly, it is being recorded on the YouTube channel as from tonight and tomorrow. A little bit of housekeeping. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to the left of the chairman or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe for you to return to the chamber. Is there anyone here tonight wishes to film this meeting? Could they please show? No, I can't see any hands. Thank you. The restriction of use of mobile phones. Would everybody present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Members requesting to speak under Council Procedure 20.1, and just to explain that to members of the public, that is councillors themselves who aren't necessary on the committee. I have on item 4 Gore Farm, and that is Councillor Fellows, and item 5 Councillor Pugh as Cabinet Member for Regeneration. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Oh, sorry, that's not on my list. I beg your pardon, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me at the moment because my laptop's slow to open, but it's the reserved, the item that's reserved to go to officers for decision.
Please don't worry.
The Ramsgate one. Thank you.
Thank you, that's Ramsgate, yes, thank you. Councillor Fellows?
Yeah, I want to speak on item 6C as well, Chair.
Yes, I got you down for that, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Oh, Councillor Boyd, I didn't see you there, Councillor Boyd.
My arm was going to fall off then. I'd like to speak on item 6B, please, sir.
6B. Thank you. I will just check again. It's the eyesight up here. Public speaking, the following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Would members please make a note on their agenda. Item 6A, All Saints Industrial Estate, All Saints Avenue, Margate. Item 6B, the Old Forge High Street, Garlinge. Item 6C, land rear of 20 to 22 Westfield Road, Birchington. Item 6D, Gloucester Avenue, Margate. And item 6E, which is again 60 to 68 High Street, and 1 to 11 George Street, Ramsgate. Thank you. Agenda item 1, I have apologies from Councillor Wright and substituted this evening by Councillor Rattigan. Glad to see Councillor Wing has arrived. Are there any other apologies? Thank you, members. Agenda item 2, are there any members have declarations of interest? Thank you. In agenda item 3, 1.2 update on the provisional minutes published in the agenda, just to correct them there and to be updated to confirm that Maeve Saunders, Councillor Maeve Saunders, sat in as a member of the committee as a substitute for Councillor Shrub at the last meeting, and not Councillor Townend, because we were aware Councillor Townend he was running late but did arrive in the end. So that is on the meeting of the 15th of February. So if they can be approved, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Orban, thank you, a seconder. Councillor Coleman Cook, do all members agree? Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to our Planning Applications Manager, Mr. Livingston, who has several points of information.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just running through some points of information for schedule items. So for schedule item 6A, this is All Saints Industrial Estate, clarification has been sought about the position of an acoustic fence, which has been confirmed by the applicant and will be shown to members in the presentation about that item. The plan condition number 5 will be updated with reference to this plan. For schedule item 6B, which is the Old Forge, the council has received comments from KCC Archaeology subsequent to the publishing of the agenda, and it confirms that the archaeology report, which was submitted as part of the planning application, which included works that had occurred on site, including trial trenching, was acceptable in terms of assessing the archaeological potential on the site, and therefore condition 11, which required that programme of archaeological works to occur, is therefore removed from the recommendation as it's unnecessary. Now, the next two are sort of more important points of information. So 6C, which is Westfield Road, I'm sure members have seen in the report that the conclusion of the report is to defer and delegate to officers for the receipt of a unilateral undertaking securing the contribution towards the SAMS project. And therefore, whilst the recommendation states approve, it's to defer back for approval subject to the receipt of that legal agreement, okay, and the safeguarding conditions. And the flip side of that is schedule item 6E, which is the High Street and George Street application. So subsequent to the printing of the agenda, a signed unilateral undertaking has been submitted to the council which confirms the contributions, which includes the SAMS contribution and the other contributions which are outlined in the report. That has been received and agreed as valid, and therefore there's no reason to defer back to officers for a determination. Therefore, it's for members to determine on the night, and the officer recommendation is for approve on that application. The other change on that item is there are two conditions, which is conditions 3 and 29. 3 is surface water drainage and 29 is about foul drainage. And these conditions are proposed to be updated so that they will now read that no development shall take place on the site excluding demolition of the building until the drainage details with respect to each item have been submitted, and that's to allow for the formulation of the drainage schemes subsequent to the assessment, basically to allow the assessment of the on-site drainage capacity at the moment to inform that following the demolition of the building. So those two conditions are updated just with that excluding demolition of the existing building clause. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Agenda item 4 is a site visit which I thank members who were able to get along to Gore End Farm, Minnis Road, Birchington. I have Councillor Fellows to speak on this one, as will Councillor. Councillor Fellows, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I oppose the proposed development of Gore End Farm for several reasons. Firstly, the addition of a third traffic light sequence will result in increased traffic congestions and longer wait times, negatively impacting the quality of life for residents and emergency services using Minnis Road. Secondly, development would destroy the heritage character and unique farmland character of the area, causing it to become overtly domestic in nature, and as a direct result lose the rich archaeological history dating back to at least the 16th century. Thirdly, the proposed development will lead to the destruction of local wildlife and much savoured green space, resulting in a reduced biodiversity and impacting the health and well-being of both people and wildlife. Also, the loss of privacy, security and views for residents of the Grade 2 listed Gore End farmhouse is a significant concern. I would like the committee to really consider the benefit of this development of just 7 houses will bring to the local community versus the irreversible loss of harm to the agricultural land, building housing that is out of reach financially for the majority, destroying the heritage appearance and farmland feel of the Birchington village. I strongly believe that proposed development should be refused and the efforts should be made to protect and restore the land and buildings for their original intended use as a farm. I urge members of the committee to strongly consider the impact of this proposed development and carefully to make the decision that prioritises the well-being of residents and the preservation of this unique character and history of this area. Members, do the right thing this evening and refuse permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fellows. I would just like to say from myself, I know a lot of members of the committee have received various emails and correspondence in other forms regarding this site. They don't, I can assure you, go unnoticed if you get a reply, but I can assure you they don't go unnoticed and they are noted. The Planning Applications Manager, which I believe is Ian, once again, will now outline the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for 7 dwellings on the site in red. So this involves the conversion of the threshing barn, which is Grade 2 listed, the conversion of the curtilage listed structure, the cowshed, 4 new builds and a new vehicular access to the site. So this is reported back to members after the last meeting. Just to confirm, the motion to approve at the last meeting was voted down. A new motion was put forward for a site visit and clarifications on archaeology, drainage, trees and biodiversity. The agenda item that's been published before you includes the officer recommendation to approve, and that follows these clarifications, and that's what's to be debated this evening. So to run through the plans, this is an aerial image of the site itself. You've then got the proposed site plan, including the new structures and the conversion of, as I say, the threshing barn into 2 dwellings, conversion of the cowshed, which is on the road, to a single dwelling, and then a separate detached building as well. So the site is within the overall allocation of SP16, which is the strategic allocation at Birchington, and that matter is dealt with in the principal section of the report. Then just a few images of the site outside. So this is a view looking back towards the traffic lights with the listed cowshed, curtilage listed cowshed on the right-hand side. And this is the existing traffic lights going down to the route that goes underneath the railway bridge, and again the listed structure to be converted on the left-hand side there. And this is the existing farm access, and you can see the existing traffic light that is present that I know a number of members used when visiting the site, that's used for vehicles exiting the site. So this is just a view showing the full extent of the site. You've got the listed building on the site next door at the bottom of the image, and then the main threshing barn in the centre of the image. And this is that building. And then you've got the view, which is to the southwest corner, which is where there's a current telecommunications mast, which is outside the site. And then turning to your left from that image, looks towards the fields, and you see basically the change in landscape denotes the change in boundary of the site. And then the view towards the listed building next door. So just to quickly go through the elevations of the proposed development, looking first at the curtilage listed building that's on Minnis Road. This is the existing building itself. What's being proposed is an extension to that building that's interconnected at ground floor level behind the existing boundary wall. You've got some alterations to the building itself. It's re-roofed with Kempeg tiles. Then that's the internal elevation looking out, so you can see where there's a slight connection below the boundary wall with the new structure to the left. This is the elevation, so you can see that the road level is on the left-hand side, so you can see the change in level that occurs with the structures in terms of the visibility from Minnis Road. And then similarly, that's the reverse elevation showing the road on the right-hand side. So this is the internal layout of that new dwelling. So it's a 3-bed dwelling. And then the roof plan. And then this is the carport, and it's a cycle store as well, with some bin storage in that building as well. And then that's the view of that store, which is to the right-hand side as you look at it from the road of that plot number 1. And there's the internal layout of that. So now looking at the actual conversion of the listed building in the centre of the site itself. This is the elevations of the building, and then the actual conversion works themselves. So you've got on the main elevation as you enter the site, as you look at it, sort of facing west. Then you've got the side elevation, which is the north elevation, then the rear elevation, which shows the new extended elements in the centre, and we pointed these out on site to members. On the left-hand side here, you've got the extension to one of the plots, and this is then shown here. So this has been reduced from the original proposal in depth. And then the internal layout of those buildings. And then you've got a ground floor plan, and then there is some first floor accommodation. Obviously, this is slightly limited and just in the existing roof slope. And then the roof plan again showing those new extensions at sort of 2-storey level. So now looking at plots 4, 5, and 6. So this is the updated elevation, which shows the actual change in the cladding. This originally was dark weatherboarding, but has now been changed to a lighter larch boarding, mainly because of the potential impact it would have on the landscape by being such a dark structure previously proposed. And then it's the rear elevation, so it's 3 dwellings in a row of terrace. You can see the change in roof form there in terms of the height, and also the design has specifically been done in this way to resemble an agricultural building. And then the floor plans, so ground floor and then first floor. And then the roof plan, and then the last building, which is the detached building. So this is a part single, part 2-storey building on the left-hand side here. So the furthest away from the farmhouse next door is the 2-storey element. So if you're looking at this elevation, the listed building next door on the neighbour's property is to the left-hand side of this image. And then this is the image with then the neighbouring property over on the right-hand side, so that the 2-storey element is the furthest away from that listed building. And then this is the ground floor, and then the first floor. So you can see it's just that element that's 2-storey with 1 bedroom in it. So in terms of the clarifications that are outlined in the agenda item, to just run through those. So the first is with regards to archaeology. To just confirm, a desk-based assessment by the Canterbury Archaeological Trust was completed and submitted with the application. KCC considered that initial investigation was acceptable and recommended specific conditions for a programme of archaeological works to be confirmed via condition. There's also a condition 8, which relates to building recording to occur on the actual listed structure itself in the centre of the site. So that is covered in points 2.1 and 2.3 in the agenda report. In terms of drainage, some of the concerns that were raised at the last meeting, I'm sure members will recall, relates to surface water drainage, and indeed in and around that area there are existing surface water drainage issues. So the new scheme proposes permeable bound gravel on the site, but the specific conditions here are conditions 3 and conditions 22 in the recommendation. Condition 3 is the general surface water drainage condition, which will require details to be provided before development commences of the surface water drainage scheme. And then condition 22 specifically requires measures to prevent the runoff onto the public highway. Those conditions are considered sufficient, with the foul water drainage condition, which is condition 3, which is also condition 3, which would require details to be provided again prior to development actually commencing. So the plan in front of you is the landscape strategy plan. This identifies the trees to be removed on the site. So these are the ones in red, that are dotted in red on the site. That in total totals 23 trees. Obviously, members walked around the site, had a look at the trees that were present. The proposal includes 23 replacement trees. These are covered by conditions 32 and 33. And the agenda report outlines how 19 of these are in communal areas, and therefore they're covered by the landscape management plan, which does cover all of the trees, but I know members were particularly concerned about those trees that were in private gardens and whether or not they're likely to stay or not, and that covers only 4 of the trees. The rest are on the areas to be dealt with via the management company responsible for the overall landscaping, which brings me on to the biodiversity issues, which are also shown on this plan itself. So there is a reptile survey and a bat survey that was submitted with the application. The application acknowledges the loss of reptile habitat on the site, but what's being proposed is a receptor site which is not to be developed to the south and northwest of the site, which, if I skip onto this plan, which are in green here, which are to be provided with specific measures through a sort of reptile strategy, which includes brash and log piles and a hibernaculum that will be set in place, as well as specific strategy for effectively reptile trapping to occur over a prolonged period, which would basically translocate those reptiles into the particular areas, as I say, to the south and then to the northwest of the site. There's also proposals for bat boxes due to the presence of one bat that was observed during the survey. So you've got a new multi-chamber bat box in the area to the northwest of the site, and then you've got 2 bat boxes, one at each end of the terrace row that's proposed. Again, that's been assessed by KCC Biodiversity to provide their professional opinion on whether or not it accords with the MPPF, and it's considered that it does, as well as according with our local plan policies. So a quick recap on highways matters. You've got the existing traffic lights, as mentioned, with an existing traffic light serving the current access. So there is a proposal here to create a new access closer to the railway line, which will include a new, effectively a moved traffic light, because there's a traffic light at the moment, so it's a new traffic light, but obviously there's an existing traffic light present. This plan is showing the area to be adopted by KCC Highways, which includes the traffic light itself. So this new junction has been assessed by Highways and has also been subject to a Phase 1 safety audit, and it's been agreed by KCC that it can progress to the next stage of a Section 278 agreement under the Highway Act. So that will look at the details of that access, which will require further safety audits to ensure that that access is safe, which is standard procedure for new junctions, especially when it's to be adopted by KCC. This is a slightly busy plan, but some of the concerns that were talked about on site related to turning in and out of that access. Again, to mention that this is obviously going to serve the new dwellings, in terms of when traffic is coming in or out of that access, there will only be one arm of traffic moving, just to ensure that everyone's clear that there's not going to be any conflict between vehicles coming from different directions at that point, because obviously it's a traffic lighted system. But obviously it will operate in the same way that the current traffic light works, is that if things are coming out of the access, then the traffic light will trigger. It doesn't automatically mean that there will be 3 stages to the signals as the existing arrangement is, and again, members that visited on the site will have noted how that works at the moment. So, as I mentioned, the recommendation is at the top of the report following the site visit. The officer recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions, and that includes condition 36, which I outlined at the last meeting, which included details of that traffic light system to come in and be agreed with Highways. And so, as I say, the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. I move that the officer's recommendation, as you've heard, is to approve. The Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members, Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We went over this. We had quite a long debate on this planning application at the last meeting. I think, well, I know a larger number of us are not happy with it for various reasons, and obviously that was shown in our vote to refuse permission. And having the site visit, for those of us that attended it, I believe has helped me to clarify why I was opposed to it and why I am still opposed to it. Because and this site visit in conjunction with me going back and going back to basics really, going back to the local plan and reading about strategic housing site policy SP16. And I've read through policy SP16 a number of times just to get my head around it, and then going on the site visit, seeing the whole site of SP16, it's helped me understand why policy SP16 does say it recognises the importance of preserving these listed buildings, Gore End, and it also recognises a number of the other things that we had concerns about around developments near this edge of the site needing noise mitigation. There are issues about infrastructure, and so policy SP16 does say that all development proposals for SP16 need to be planned and implemented in a coordinated manner. So a number of the conditions that have been applied to this application just for this little corner of SP16 may not be appropriate, or may be better served if the whole of SP16 was dealt with in a planned and coordinated manner, as stated in the local plan, in the section on this. Because I don't think this necessarily gives full justice to preserving the listed buildings. It's converting them into accommodations that aren't necessarily keeping them as they should be kept. They are designated heritage assets which should be kept as such. And all the other issues I've still got with this around the ecology, around the highways issues. I mean, I know the statutory consultees have come back and said for this little part of SB16, these conditions are okay and they solve those problems. But I think if this was looked at as a whole site, that it should be, I believe, as the local plan says, then there may be different solutions to this, and then would likely be able to deliver the housing that is stated in SB16 and deal with this important corner of the site in a better way than this application is. So I won't be supporting the recommendation to approve this application, and I shall be asking for it to be rejected along the lines that it doesn't meet policy SB16. So that although the principle of development for SB16 is there, it's not being done in a way that the local plan says it should be done, and so that will be what I shall be proposing as a reason for refusal for this.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I'm going to bring it back in.
I just want to clarify one point. This was something clarified on the site visit. At the previous meeting, the motion that was put forward was to approve, and that was voted down. The motion wasn't put forward to refuse the application. So the vote isn't an up-down, it's a voting on the proposal that's on the floor. So it wasn't voted to refuse the application. That's obviously what will come this evening if this motion that's currently before falls. I just wanted to pick up a point about SP16 because this has come up, and obviously it is written into the officer report specifically about this, because there is the fact that this application has come forward separate from the strategic, the large major application that's coming for Birchington. Obviously, the report acknowledges that this doesn't come forward as part with a master plan for the wider development site. This is an issue that has been looked at before in applications, especially the application that members will recall on Stirling Way that members visited. That was part of the Eurokent site, and that policy is exactly the same way, requires a master plan to be submitted, and that actually was part of the judicial review, which obviously resulted in council's decision being quashed, and this issue was specifically looked at as whether or not actually it should be quashed on that ground as well. In that instance, it was considered that if the development itself on its own merits doesn't compromise the ability of the site to come forward, the bigger site to come forward, then you could approve it. It's not an automatic refusal point. So there's got to be harm that's attached to this. Now, obviously, to your point earlier, you've mentioned about the impact on the listed building, which is part of the concern here. But I just wanted to clarify that point. It's not just that it hasn't given the master plan. There's got to be an actual harm attached to the fact that this site is coming forward for development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Wing. I won't argue.
I'd also like to comment on SP16, because I think SP16 involves, or should involve, looking at the cumulative impact of how a number of developments could come together and potentially increase the negative impact or the positive impact on an area. And I this is a very small site. I was grateful to have the site visit, because it did clear up in my mind some things that were obviously cleared up, but then it made me concerned in other areas. And flooding is the one thing I would like to pick up on again. I didn't realise quite how low the underpass is on the railway, and I didn't really realise how the flooding is quite common there. And it seems to me that we've got this, and then you look to the rest of the field and you think there's another massive area that's going to be covered in houses, which will increase the amount of surface water, because it's presently open farmland which water drains through quite freely. I accept that it wasn't a refusal, but I would prefer to see a motion that would suggest we need to see the modelling of the water, the drainage off the site, and we need to see that in relation to the other applications coming forward, because you can't take something in isolation. And SP16, I think, is about looking at the cumulative impact of a number of developments and how they may overall positively or negatively impact on various things, including ecology, heritage, and of course flooding, which we're all concerned about. So I can't support this application, because I'd like to see it in the wider area of the entire area, the whole site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Crinden.
I really wanted to comment on the flooding issue. It was actually quite reassuring to see the site as far as flooding from the site would be concerned. But I remain concerned that the entrance, where the traffic light is going to be, is being moved so close to that bridge, which is where the road flooding is. And I suspect, and whilst that's perhaps not for us to consider, but I suspect that the flooding under the bridge may well cause a problem to that entrance for those that are going in and out of it. Those that actually drive through there may actually know that better than I do. But it's certainly, when you look at the picture, you don't get a sense of just how close that proposed entrance is to where that flooding under the bridge is happening. And I also, just out of curiosity, wondered, can you point out to us where we found the well? And can you roughly point out to us where that was? Because I'm just trying to translate my on the ground to picture.
If you've got plot 1 and 7, so that was where the boundary was. There was obviously some slight dispute between applicant and neighbour about it, but I think the main point is Upper Gore End Farmhouse, which hopefully you can see the mouse circling around. It's in this area here, basically. Obviously, so it's not proposed to be developed in terms of footprint of buildings. If I could just come back on the drainage point again. This is an issue that's come up, obviously, in various appeals, including the Shottendane Road public inquiry in terms of drainage, and consistently the line that's been taken by inspectors is that drainage can be dealt with via planning condition. It can be dealt with through surface water drainage schemes, of which the details are provided, subsequent to approval of the application. And obviously we think those condition safeguards are acceptable. specifically, obviously, it's acknowledged at the moment there's effectively, from surface water drainage, from flash floods, etc., in rainwater storm events, there is currently an issue in terms of the highway, and the whole aim of the strategy would have to be that it doesn't make it any worse. It would never get rid of the issue, and I think that's the important point. But again, it comes back to the point that this scheme has to be looked at on its own merits. This is providing 7 residential properties, which we are in a situation where we are in presumption in favour of sustainable development. That new housing development has to be weighed with significant weight against demonstrable harm, and it's all about demonstrable harm. Obviously, we've put our position forward on this, but I just want to make clear that the conditions that have been put forward are standard conditions that you'd expect on development such as this when there is a surface water drainage issue outside of the site.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I understand that members may not like this proposal, but I don't think we're anywhere closer to hearing a sustainable reason for refusal from any member of the committee. We didn't hear any last time. We couldn't come up with any when we considered it, which is why we decided to go for a site visit. And the reality is that if this committee refuses this application, it will be passed by the Planning Inspectorate, and the consequence will be that the taxpayers of Thanet will probably have to pay for the costs of the process. So I should be voting to support the officer's recommendation. I understand people's reservations and concerns, but I've not heard anything which would justify refusal. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Everett. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I was also very grateful for the site visit. Unfortunately, it didn't affect me in the way it did others. I believe that the heritage buildings have been developed, will be developed in a very tasteful way. There'll be 7 very attractive properties. That was my main concern, was the heritage that was lost. I believe that drainage issue has been, and the replacement of trees, the biodiversity, the highways issues have all been addressed. And I think, like Councillor Everett, that we don't really have any real reasons to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other members, so I'm going to put it to you for the vote to those in favour to approve. Will they please show their hands? Those against? Abstentions? I believe that is carried. That is carried. Thank you, members.
Can I just ask what the vote was? So I couldn't see everyone.
It was carried, Councillor Con. 8, 4, 1. 8. Yep, 8. Yep. So, as you gather, members and members of the public, that has been approved. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. This is an update for Unit 1 and 2, Belgrave Road, Margate. I don't have any public speaking, but I have Councillor Pugh, as I mentioned, who is Cabinet Member for Regeneration. Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. I know, and members will, planning committee members will know that this plan application came to committee last month, and I don't want to rehash and go on and repeat what I said at last month's planning committee. Subsequent to your decision, the applicant has gone away and made amendments. I stand by the comments that I made at the last planning committee meeting. I think that the previous design and the scheme was incredibly bold. I think it's what's needed, particularly in Margate, and I think we need to think a little bit outside the box. And it's important that we encourage development of brownfield sites, particularly in our town centres. Changes have been made to this application. The applicant's been incredibly keen to overcome many of the hurdles and the concerns that planning committee members raised last time. The colour scheme has been amended. The changes to the back have been put forward as well. I know that's a comment that was made before, and that the overlooking issues to the side of the property in relation to the property that's already there on Marine Gardens, the overlooking issues have now been resolved. I understand from the applicant as well that the applicant is willing to provide full contributions through Section 106. That could be tied up in a legal agreement. The reasons for refusal, particularly the second reason with the legal framework, if the planning committee is to approve this application, then that can be tied up in a variation or a subsequent legal agreement. I don't necessarily think that that should be a reason to refuse this when it can be overcome if the planning committee want them to. The first reason for refusal on the height, I'd like to reiterate again, but I don't want to hash over it, that Margate has a very varied building height across the entirety of the town. Behind this, to the back of this, the back of Dreamland, is Arlington House. I find it astonishing that we can try and refuse a scheme of 4 or 5 stories or even 6 stories of this height when we've got Arlington House behind us. I'm not advocating that we tear down Arlington House, but I think it's just important that we notice and understand that, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a particularly tall building in relation to other things. Again, the concern particularly with the conservation area, I think we need to be bold. I think we need to appreciate that this is a landowner and a developer that wants to come in and create something unique and different for Margate. And I think that particularly the entrance to Dreamland across the road, I think it deserves something better than is currently there, if I'm quite honest. And I would reiterate again how important I feel it is that we encourage people to move back into the town centres, that we have more housing development in our town centres, particularly in the hope that it means that we have to build less on agricultural farmland. I think that's really important. To summarise, and I will be quick, apologies Chair, bear with me. I know that the applicant is willing to overcome many of the 3 reasons for refusal that have still been recommendations for refusal that have been put forward. I think a continuing dialogue should be maintained, and particularly the legal agreement, all of that can be tied up in a condition. And quite honestly, if you don't like the colour again, then we can have a vote today, and you can put that in as a variation or a condition. But I hope that you will approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. We'll pop up B&Q afterwards. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Very brief reminder, the application is for site in Belgrave Road, so it's for 3 commercial units at ground floor with a 3-storey extension above with 10 flats. So this was deferred to officers to seek amendments to address concerns related to the impact on character and appearance of the area. Some of those points that were raised have been summarised in the agenda report, and as already outlined, we have received some amendments, but I'm just very quickly going to run through just a bit of context. So the site is within the Margate Conservation Area and is opposite the Margate Seafront Conservation Area. You've got the listed buildings next door, 12 and 12A, which is to the north of the site. Then you've got an allocated housing site to the rear, which is dealt with in the report. So just reference of Eaton Hill here and Belgrave Road here with Marine Gardens at the top. So this is the building. There's a view further back. Then we've got a view the other side. So you've got the listed building on the left-hand side. Listed building from the front, across next to the clock tower. This is the view of the rear of that listed building, so you can see the distance between the existing building and the rear of the listed building. Then this is a view down from Eaton Road, so you can see the listed building here, and you can see the gable of the existing building, which is to be retained and built above. And then this is a view down Eaton Hill. So this single-storey sort of warehouse-style building is outside the site. So the building would be behind this, and we'll look at that in some images later. So this is the image of the scheme as it was put before members. So just on this, it's just important to look at the change that's been made in terms of the actual materials itself. The CGI has changed in terms of its aspect with buildings adjacent to it, but I just want members to focus, look at the change in materials that have been proposed. So when I say change in materials, I really mean the colour has changed. So the materials are the same, the cladding on the sort of element at the rear and at the top floor, the fact that it's it's a brick facade at first and second floor, but it's now got a brick facade at ground floor rather than painted, because it was, as you can see, the dark paint that was on there. It's now with the brick at ground floor. The signage also across the top has also gone. So just going through some of the other changes quickly. So we've got the the existing block plan here, and then this is the new roof plan, and we'll look at the changes that have been made on the northern part of the building next to the listed buildings as we look at the elevations. So this is the elevation as it was. So again, what's changed here, if I click it, the signage is gone, and there have been some changes that have been made on the left-hand side here. So the balcony at second floor level previously extended the full width of the building. That's been reduced, and that's to do with the overlooking issues that officers raised, as well as some changes at the sort of the roof level as well to accommodate some floor plan changes, which we'll look at. So the existing south elevation of the building, so again facing towards the back of the listed buildings there, this is what was proposed. Now this hasn't changed in scale, so this building, this view is exactly the same scale, ignore the fact that it's just moved, but it's just to confirm on the ground floor it's now brick rather than the painted, dark painted facade. Then the rear elevation of the building at the moment. So this is where some of the other changes have occurred. So members will recall there were the metal cross braces that were there. So what's changed now is that it's now yellow rendered with cladding, and we'll look at that on the CGI, which will show you it a bit clearer. And then this is the internal elevation, which doesn't change, that accesses those flats at the upper levels. And then this is the elevation that's changed, which is the north. So this is looking with the listed building behind you, looking towards the side of the site. This was the original proposal, so you can see the second floor balcony that's here, and it's slightly changed. Again, you'll see it on the CGI a bit better with some changes that have been made there as well. So this is the section of that elevation. So you can see there was a terrace on this second floor area. That has now been removed as part of the amendments. So this was the existing and then the previous scheme, and then this is the new scheme. And similarly, that is actually just the new elevation, but obviously, as I say, that doesn't actually change the size of the structure itself. So the existing floor plans, ground floor and roof plan. The existing ground floor plan, so this doesn't change from the previous proposal. So you've got two smaller units and then one larger commercial unit with residents parking at ground floor. You've got bin storage and cycle store on the left-hand side with the stair core at the rear that accesses all the flats. So then this was the original first floor plan, and so what you've got here is you can see the balcony is open for this unit at the front here all the way across the frontage, which would have allowed someone to stand in this area here and have, in our view, direct views into the windows of the neighbouring property. So what's been proposed here is that internally where the mouse pointer is, that there would be a 1.1 metre high wall, so the same height as the balustrading at the front, but on the return, to stop access to this area. As well as that, these are windows here within the living area, so they're not doors that are proposed. Now, as you'll see from the report, whilst this is welcome to physically try and restrict access to this area, and this applies to the third floor plan as well, it is considered by office that you do need privacy screens of some sort, because that in itself isn't considered to be necessary. Just if someone wanted to use and get the best views of the sea, which is what this balcony part would provide, it's our view that you'd also need a condition to require privacy screens. But as the report outlines, the combination of a condition for privacy screens and indeed the floor plan changes are enough to overcome the reason for refusal, which is why it's not recommended to refuse the application on overlooking now. In part, that comes from the removal entirely of the second floor balcony on the left hand side, so you can see that section is now gone. There's no balcony in that section. And then on the third floor, again much more difficult on the third floor, but you have got again a restricted inner wall at this point here next to the hashed area, where it would be 1.1 metre in height to avoid people going to the full extent of adjacent to the neighbouring building. And then this is the new roof plan. So just to look at the CGIs again, mainly just in terms of the palette of materials. So again, that's the change in the palette on that view. This is the view that's been provided, obviously from Marine Gardens. And you can see, so the materials, so you can see the change that's now occurred here. So you've got no balcony at this area. Again, you can see the change in materials. And then the rear, so what's been changed here is, obviously, as I say, it's more open with the panels that are present. So, as has already been mentioned by Councillor Pugh, the applicant has confirmed that they are willing to provide the contributions requested within the report and the heads of terms. We have received a draft unilateral undertaking for the securing of those contributions. However, it doesn't actually secure those obligations. There are a few checks that need to be done about land ownership and various different things. So we're not in a position to say that reason for refusal has been overcome at this stage. However, if members were minded to approve the development, as I've already outlined in other points of information, it's entirely possible to defer back to officers for approval, subject to the legal agreement coming in that secures those obligations. So it's a technical reason for refusal if members refuse it this evening, that it would be refused on those grounds, but it can be overcome if members consider that that first reason for refusal isn't a reason for refusal you want to refuse the application on. The officer view, though, on the proposal is, whilst the living conditions issue has been dealt with, it is still considered to be a development that is too high. It does, in our view, have an incongruous and dominant overbearing impact, specifically in regards to the setting of the listed building that's on the left-hand side of the image that you can see, as well as the hierarchy of buildings in the conservation area, both the Margate conservation area and the Margate seafront conservation area. And obviously significant weight has to be given to any harm to designated heritage assets, and therefore that has to be weighed against any benefits that do accrue from the development. And it's acknowledged in the report that there are benefits from the redevelopment of this site and the provision of 10 residential units in this location, but the officer view is that that balance hasn't outweighed the harm, and therefore the recommendation from officers is still to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. The Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Members, a few hands going up. Councillor Crinden.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought he was going to get there first.
I can't see him tonight. Which,
as I said last time, I loved the design. I loved the orange and green. I thought it was great. I thought the lettering on the roof was a little bit naff, but I don't know if that's a technical term or not. So I'm quite pleased to see that gone. I can live with the more muted colours. The rear view is better than the slap in the face like a wet kipper that was the original design, and I still like it. So I don't actually have any questions or challenges on it. The only thing I will add is that I was very disappointed to see that item number 2, the applicant had failed to enter into the legal agreement, and it just felt like the applicant has kind of rushed back to committee a little bit without actually having ticked all the boxes, and I think that's my only concern. But apart from that, I still like it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you. I agree. I like the original. I think we really do need to encourage investment to the area and the provision of housing. However, changes have been made to meet the concerns of members, and I think for that reason, I cannot see any reason to reject this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allman.
Well, thank you, Chair. How kind. As the member who asked for this to go back to officers for to get some further information to see if they'll change, I'm pleased. I'm pleased with what I'm seeing. Yes, it is a bit bulky, but when you look at it from the front, if you stand in front of that listed building, you won't notice the bulk. That's my opinion. I can't accept that we should refuse this. I can't accept either that because someone's putting money in the area, we should just approve it. I mean, that's rubbish. We shouldn't be looking at anything like that. But what we should be looking at is what it's going to provide for Margate and what it's going to provide better than what is there now. 10 new dwellings, new shops on the ground floor. Yes, it's a bit different, but I'll fully support this application against the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. And I couldn't see you behind Councillor Crittenden. So, any other Councillor Paulmore?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the developer has listened to our concerns. He's made amendments to make it more pleasing and blend in. And I think the quirkiness of the building blends in with the arcade scenery that we've got there, which is part of what Margate is. It is changing a brownfield site to accommodation and to commercial use. So I don't agree with the officer's recommendation refusal, and I'll be putting forward for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Keane.
As it seems many people are looking towards approval, can we just clarify, do we need to put in a condition, as you said, about the, as we haven't got the assurances we need?
I've got to put it to the vote first, Councillor Keane, and see what happens then, and then I will come to Mr Livingston. But thank you for that. I do understand. Thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment slightly facetiously. The previous rear of the building looked like a football stadium to me.
You would know that, wouldn't you?
With the metal cross braces, which I do have some knowledge of. So I think that it doesn't look like that now, which is probably a good thing, because I don't think what appeared to be a football stadium in the middle of Margate was necessarily a good idea. Thank you.
I can't see you standing there watching football anyway. Yeah, I know. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, well, I'm going to put this, I have to the vote, which the officer's recommendation is to refuse. Those who accept that, could they please show their hands? Those against? Right, abstentions? That is... I'm sure. Thank you. Yeah, we did. Thank you. That motion has been lost. So once again, I turn to Mr. Livingston, please.
Thank you. I think members of the majority of members have made it quite clear about they find the change to the design acceptable. So, in line with what I was saying earlier, in terms of what officers would then recommend in this instance, in terms of a motion, that the motion that be most appropriate would be, in our view, to defer and delegate to officers for approval, subject to the receipt of an acceptable signed obligation securing the required planning obligations and safeguarding conditions, because you'll see from the consultee views there are quite a few other consultee comments about different conditions that are needed, and that would include privacy screens to the northern balcony boundaries, and that's on the grounds that the economic and housing benefits outweigh the limited impact, as members have considered it, on conservation area and adjacent listed buildings.
Thank you, Ian. You've heard, obviously, your answers, I hope. I need a proposer for that, which is Councillor Orban.
Yeah, I propose all of that, Chair. Obviously, exactly what Mr Livingston said, subject to the Section 106 agreement coming in for approval. Yeah, as he said.
Thank you.
As the man said.
Seconder, Councillor Bayford. Do members agree?
Agree.
Put the hands up.
Show of hands, please. Anyone against? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. You've got me as well. Thank you very much, members, for that. agenda item 6 is just to tell you about site visits. If there are any site visits decided tonight, they will be on Friday the 31st of March. A little bit earlier than normal, but I think we know what's going to happen next.
It's because of Good Friday.
Oh, is it?
Next week's Good Friday.
Oh, right. I've just been told it's Good Friday after that, so happy Easter and so on. Agenda item 6A, All Saints Avenue Industrial Estate, All Saints Avenue, Margate. Speaking against the application is a Mr. Hodgman. Are you there, Mr. Hodgman? You are. You have 3 minutes, if you can, please.
Okay, so the applicant has put in for 58 units on this site, which I think is too many for the size of the site. To squeeze that many in, they've adopted a sort of cul-de-sac layout, which creates some sort of dead ends. If you look at the, if you actually look at the site plan, the distance between the new warehousing, the actual road is going to be 5.5 metres wide, which is nowhere near wide enough for this. I don't think. The report acknowledges the fact that large commercial vehicles will be visiting this site, including waste vehicles and delivery vehicles. The waste vehicles apparently are up to about 13.5 metres long. Now, if a 13.5 metre long vehicle goes into the site and it's in a road that's only 5.5 metres wide, there's no way that's going to be able to turn around. It's going to have to back out. And we're talking about a distance of, I haven't actually measured it, sort of 150 to 200 yards reversing. That is dangerous. That is dangerous, and that really should not be allowed. There was a previous application for this site, sort of similar in some ways, but larger buildings, but quite dense. But it did have a perimeter road right round the development. And that sort of then meant that everything could drive in and drive off the estate. That's what's required here. This is wrong, and it's going to cause accidents. This is an accident waiting to happen like this. It needs to be changed. I accept it would mean the loss of a few of the units, but this is just not right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hogman. Pass you over to Ian once again for the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application that was previously reported to members in December. So it's an outline application for 58 light industrial units, including all details except for landscaping within this outline application. So previously in December, members deferred back to officers to seek additional information on turning within the site and a reduction in the number of units to increase parking and turning available. So I'll come back to that in a second. So we have received amended plans with 8 additional parking spaces, but with no reduction in units. So the site is allocated as employment land in the local plan, so it's supported in principle under policy EC1. I'm just going to remind members of the site itself. So this site is the large sort of hard surfaced area. The tree perimeter that runs around properties on Railway Terrace and Tivoli Park Avenue runs along the side of the site. Going through, this is the vehicular access onto All Saints Avenue, which should be redone as part of the proposal. This is looking back towards the existing access. Just to talk a bit about Railway Terrace, these properties are set up from the ground level on this site, and so I'm going to show members some photos of that. You can also see how the site at the moment has a hoarding that runs, that means you can't access that site at the moment, which runs along and includes this triangle of land, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this is an image just showing, you can see the corner of the dwelling there, so you can see the sort of change in level we're talking about. And then this is a view when the hoarding starts, so you can see that there's quite a change in level with those dwellings. These are the front elevations of the properties on Railway Terrace. And this is another view, so you can see the access at the moment is in a pretty poor state. So this is a view looking back towards those trees at the back of those properties on Railway Terrace, and you can see again the hoarding that's restricting access to the site. And then this is inside the site, so the hoarding is on the right hand side of the image there, and these are the trees that are with the residential properties behind. This is just a detailed view in, so again you can see that significant change in level. Then this is just a view showing the rear of the properties on Tivoli Park Avenue, and we're going to have a little look at the boundary along there. You can see it's got lots of existing landscaping which is proposed to be retained as part of the development. So again you can see there's a quite significant bank where the trees are located, and this is a longer sweep of those trees. And again you can see the change in level that occurs. These are the first floor bits that you can see there on those properties. And then this is a view looking back towards those trees again. And so just to look, you've got an access that runs inside the site that runs to the rear here, which is obviously used as open storage, and then a view round to the back, and you can see existing businesses which use the current access as well as their access to the rear. So you've got, this is the all access area here for open storage. So this is an access that's in the site that we'll look at on the floor plan, on the site plans. So as mentioned, there is a previous approval on this site, which was 2016, which approved three light industrial units under use class, as it was B1, with the blue part of the image on the left being general industrial. So you can see the arrangement that was proposed in that instance, as mentioned, was parking along the sides and then a route that ran around the site, and you can see in a bit more detail on the image on the right hand side. So the principle of development was found to be acceptable. So the proposed scheme does similarly in terms of keeping the landscaping, or proposing to keep the landscaping, not developing that on the site. So this is the revised plan, and we'll look at in detail what has actually changed, because it's primarily around the access and the parking available before you actually get into the site itself. So looking at it in a bit more detail, this was the plan as it was submitted. You can see this triangle here of land, which was shown with just a couple of parking spaces on, as well as an area alongside the trees and alongside the access. You've got under this cover here the proposal for 4 spaces here and some van parking with 5 spaces here. What's been proposed is to add 8 parking spaces to this area for general parking use, and there's also some parking that's been lost at the bottom, which, apologies, you won't necessarily be able to see. But in the middle of the image, there's a couple of spaces have been effectively moved round, so they're outside of that internal area, and they're in this area here for general parking, which has been put forward. So just to go through the detailed bits of the site plan as well. So you've got in total. You've got 146 spaces serving all of the units. You've got 2 dedicated spaces for each of these units themselves. You can see on this plan the grey retaining wall to be erected, which runs along the bank. So you can see this is the large bank area that we looked at on the photographs. You've got then the access road that runs down all the way to the other business, where we looked at the image, which is down at the bottom of this plan. So just to look at some of the elevations, just to show the type of design of the buildings. So we're looking at metal clad buildings. They're 2-storey in terms of having mezzanine levels. The side elevations are brick elevations, and then I'll just show you the middle section of buildings. Just to give you an idea, it's the middle section of buildings where you've got actually the long run. This is what you're looking at. So again, you've got it's open at the moment, but I know there was a query about mezzanines that we talked about last time. And these are some of the other elevations. So there's all very similar design. So just to pick up a point with regards to turning. So at the moment, any large vehicles, including any Arctics that serve the existing buildings, existing businesses, such as the timber suppliers, have to use this triangle of land here to turn around. That is not changing. This proposal will not change that. It will not restrict access to this area. And this is the area in question. So that we have had a submission of plans that show how turning of an Arctic occurs or can occur at the moment, and this does not propose to alter that ability, which also would obviously include the ability of vehicles which would, as mentioned, have to effectively, if there was a significant scale vehicle that was accessing one of the units for whatever reason, even though these are very small units, then they would have to reverse down the access road internally in the site to then be able to turn around in this area. Highways have looked at specifically the impact on the highway network, because it's got to be there's severe harm to the highway network to be refused on a highway ground. And because there's the ability to turn within the site and leave using a forward gear, there is no objection from highways on that basis. And indeed, this does not make the situation any worse than the current turning arrangements that are on the site for the existing businesses. In terms of the relationship with the neighbouring properties, one element that wasn't requested by members but has been added is an acoustic fence that's been proposed, which would run the site side of these trees, and you can see it, which is shown on this plan here. So you can see that there is proposed to have, as well as the retaining wall, then there is to be a 2 metre high acoustic fence. It's not considered by officers that is necessary by virtue of the fact that there are conditions proposed which would restrict the opening hours of these units, so that they would not be able to be open on Sundays, and they wouldn't be able to be open on Monday to Friday or Saturdays past 6 o'clock and not be used on that basis. There is obviously the issue of the change in levels, which means that it's considered by officers that there is an acceptable relationship in terms of distances from different properties. And then this is just the section of the retaining wall. So overall, the proposal provides 58 units on an allocated employment site. So there is tangible economic benefit that needs to be weighed in favour of the development. As I mentioned, highways have had no objection to the proposal, and it does include improvements to the access, including a new pedestrian footway along the north of the site, which obviously isn't present at the moment. And there are on-street controls at the moment along All Saints Avenue. And therefore, whilst I appreciate there are some concerns about the internal movement of vehicles, it's not, in officers' view, possible to demonstrate that there's severe harm to the highway network by virtue of this proposal. As I mentioned, due to the change in levels and also the planning conditions, it's considered there is a significant harm to neighbouring properties. And therefore, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to planning conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation, as you heard, was for approval. Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did actually mention acoustic fencing the last time during the last meeting, so I'm just saying that, just reminding you. I have to say, I still think the site is cramped. I think that the top 8 units, they obviously hadn't listened to what we were saying. I don't think that they should be there. That solves all the problems with relation to the neighbouring residential properties. And they could have spaced that out a little bit more, and as our resident said, that would have given them a little bit more turning space as well. So I have to say, Chair, I don't think I can support this officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. Very similar. I remember we discussed this before, and we said that there were too many units, not enough room for manoeuvre. We did ask for extra parking spaces, and they have done that, and we did ask about the acoustics, and they've done that. But rather with what the residents saying, I'm concerned about the turning of large vehicles. What happens if 2 turn up at once? Sorry, that's just my thinking. one's going to have to back out. I think it's overdevelopment on that, and I'm sure that there's a better way they can do this.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Has any figures been put forward to estimate the amount of movements there would be of that many units? Okay.
Sorry, can I just confirm about the overall number of units or those end units? Sorry, I didn't quite catch.
Yeah, the overall number of units, picking up on Councillor Crittenden's point, if two turn up at the same time, given that we are developing many more units on this site, have they provided any metrics around assumed usage? Thank you.
So there was a transport assessment that was submitted with the application, which did include movements, and specifically is looking at the current junction that accesses All Saints Avenue in terms of existing visibility displays, potential for vehicular conflict, as mentioned, in terms of the ability of vehicles to pass on that junction. And again, highways have stated that there's not considered to be severe harm to the network on those specific grounds, and the level of parking that's provided is sufficient on the site. I think just to pick up on some of the points that have been raised in terms of that there are too many units on the site, I think the concern from officers is that doesn't result in tangible harm to either, as I say, the highway network, in terms of we're not supported by KCC Highways on any refusal on that ground, as well as that this is a site that doesn't have a defined character. This is not it's very, very difficult to argue that there's harm to the character and appearance of the area by virtue of the number of units on this site. It's an employment site, it's not a residential site. And the concern, again, as a major development, an application which obviously has potential ramifications in terms of an approval by an inspector, that the benefits of the number of units, whilst obviously appreciate what members are saying about there are too many of them and they could have resolved the concerns that you've got, on balance, it's our view that the benefits do outweigh any concerns with regards to the particular issues to do with turning on the site.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I'm quite concerned, thank you, about impact on neighbours. So I think it goes back to the number of potential vehicle movements on site and the size of the vehicle movements on site. So we have some residential homes and the number of units on site has been significantly increased. We have to make the assumption that the vast majority of possible vehicles visiting that site, particularly the largest ones, are going to be diesel vehicles throwing out particulates. And a large diesel vehicle attempting to back up to either deliver at the bottom or then reverse back up to get back to that turning point is going to obviously create a significant amount of noise backing up and also a significant amount of particulates and pollution that could well impact the surrounding neighbours. So I would much the previous scheme where vehicles went in and out, so there was a route in and out, which would mean a continuous flow rather than this attempting of a vehicle to back up, would be a much better way to try and reduce the impact or the potential impact on those houses there and the surrounding environment. So I can't support this plan in its present shape, although I agree that we need smaller units.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Bring back Ian Trump.
Just on the point with regards to air quality, there's an air quality assessment that was submitted with the application, which looked specifically at vehicle movements and receptors, both pedestrian receptors and also residents in and around there. That was assessed by the environmental health team, and it was considered that there wouldn't be, it was within an acceptable range without harming human health. And so again, in terms of demonstrable harm to outweigh the benefits, there is obviously expert advice that's been provided to state quite clearly that there wouldn't be a tangible harm that could be weighed against it, again, on the basis, and it's in the officer report, and as well the environmental health concerns are in there. So whilst vehicular movements will of course increase above the level at the moment, because the site is just open, it's not to an extent that it would cause any impacts with regards to health, with regards to air quality, and specifically even with vehicles reversing up there, which obviously is the aim here, is to avoid it by keeping that turning area open.
Thank you. Councillor Orban, you wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to make it clear that this is well needed area for these kind of units. I mean, it's a perfect place for them, apart from a bit on the top. And I didn't want it to sound nitpicking, but I do think they used their loaf and removed those ones at the top. There wouldn't be any issue with it at all for any of us members in it. I specifically have the concern in relation to noise emissions from the units, even though they may be deemed to be light industrial units. Having been on many industrial site, light industrial units, some of those doors are open during the summer, bang, everything like that. And I know there's conditions to restrict hours, but you know I still think it's not good enough to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alderman. Councillor Wallings.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that springs to mind is with 50 units there, you could easily get more than just 1 or 2 lorries there. So it's not going to be a problem with 2, it's going to be a problem with maybe half a dozen. Even more of an issue, looking at it, is it's an industrial unit, so things could happen and the fire engine might be needed. Fire engines aren't articulated, they're going to have great trouble getting in and then getting out. Okay. So for safety reasons alone, it's not particularly safe if a fire engine can't get there.
Thank you, Councillor Wallings. Miles away there. Carry on, please. Sorry, Councillor Towning.
Thank you. I believe there's an overdevelopment of the site. I think if you took away the 8 front units, would change the entire aspect of this site and give more space for vehicles, large vehicles coming in and going out. And I think that's a very good point raised about the fire engines and emergency services. I think, you know, they have to be a serious consideration to any industrial site, you know, and that hasn't really come forward as far as we can see.
Thank you, Councillor Towning. I think the right man to speak, Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to be very careful what I say regarding that, but regarding emergency vehicles, there's no issue at all. Having been an emergency fire appliance driver myself, and still am, there is no issue. But I have to be careful what I say because I don't want to bring my employment into this. But from my personal perspective, there is no issue with emergency vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Moore. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, really. This application, as you say, we reviewed a similar one on this site in December. So this is a brand new application.
No, it's not.
Is it or not? On from that.
No. I'll bring back Mr. Evans.
Yeah, it's not a new application, so it's the same application. What has happened is we've received amended plans which we've consulted on, so that's why it's being brought back in this manner, because we obviously consulted on some amendments.
Okay, understood. Okay. So is that why there may not necessarily have been the same re-contact with residents in the area and re-putting up of the yellow signs and all that stuff?
Yeah, but letters went out, but no new site notice was posted.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Any other members? Okay, members, I'm going to put this to you. As you gather, it is for officers' approval. Those in favour, will they please show by hands? Those against? Abstentions? That has fallen. Once again, bear with me, please. Members, we're going to take a short adjournment, and it will be short. I know we have members of the public here with us tonight. Could I ask a member, as we have done before, to come up just to have a word with their thoughts, so we can put this to you? What a surprise. No. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. Councillor Towning. Councillor Towning. Thank you. Just for the sake of members, what we've just done is obviously had a few minutes to talk to officer, myself and the member. It has been said before, what are we talking about and everything else, but it is to resolve an issue we have, because as you know, it's down for approval, this application. It's been refused, so we have to come up with something else, and I believe that has been achieved. So I'm going to hand over to who's going to propose a motion, Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The motion I propose is that this be deferred and delegated back to officers to come up with reasons for refusal, as they are finding it difficult at the moment. And also, whilst they're doing that, is to go back to the applicant to try one more time to get them to remove those units of which we talked about. If that isn't the case, either way, it will come back to the next planning meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. That's a proposal. Could I have a second for that, Councillor Shrub? Do members agree? A show of hands, please. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? One. That has been carried. Thank you for that, members. Thank you, Ian. Okay, moving on once again to agenda item 6B, which is the Old Forge, High Street, Garlinge and Margate. Speaking in favour of this application is a Mr. Jonathan Buckwell. Are you there, Mr. Buckwell? You are. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This scheme is being proposed by Future Homes, a local small developer based in Thanet who has an excellent track record in providing good quality homes. I would like to just address a couple of the concerns that have been raised by local residents. Firstly, the access. Members will note that the council has previously approved 4 houses on this site. Whilst that was an outline application, the access is exactly the same as that which is proposed tonight, and that was shown in detail previously. That was designed taking into account advice from Kent County Council, and as I mentioned, it was approved by this council. The bridleway meets the requirements of Kent's Public Rights of Way team. Traffic movements here will be very limited and at very low speed. And I agree with the planning officer that the proposals will not make the bridleway unsafe for use. And other than a very short section at the entrance, less than 5 metres in length, the bridleway will remain separated from traffic in any event. There's been no objection from either KCC Highways or the Public Rights of Way team. Turning to the parking area opposite the Old Forge, this will be laid out in such a way that there will only be 2 parking spaces available, which should certainly help improve the access to the driveway of number 158. We've listened to the concerns that have been raised in relation to waste collection, and we've amended the proposals to remove the previously proposed structure. Most of the time, bins will be stored within the gardens of the proposed houses so that the residents have easy access to them, and it's only on collection days that bins will be taken to the presentation point opposite the Old Forge, which is on the current collection route. As you know, the council lacks a 5-year supply, so the tilted balance applies. Planning permission, as mentioned, has been previously granted for the same size and scale of development on the site with the same access arrangements. And as you'll have seen, some of the local residents, whilst concerns have been raised, some have said that they are not opposed to the development in principle, and indeed some have expressed support for certain aspects, such as removing the potential for overparking opposite the Old Forge. So in light of this, it's clear the adverse impacts of the scheme do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh its benefits, and therefore I hope you can support these proposals tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buckwell. Speaking against the application is Miss Natasha Hart. Okay. Miss Hart, please, 3 minutes.
Okay.
In principle, I've no major issue with the proposed 4 dwellings to the rear of our next door neighbour's property, though I do have many reservations about squeezing that many in and the subsequent overlooking. However, my main concerns reflect those of the many neighbours who have also opposed this application regarding the multiple negative impacts of this plan as currently presented creates. Please note the 2 divorced sites we're discussing in regards to this plan, the rear garden area and the empty plot opposite the current old forge, are separated by a public bridleway used by pedestrians, horses, cyclists and much local traffic. And there is a lot. I live there. I open my front door to it. I'd like to focus the committee's attention to the plot opposite, currently used for parking and proposed to be a bin presentation area, along with 2 parking spaces. Firstly, and most significantly, these bin spaces, if permitted, will make it completely impossible for waste collection to get through. No less than 18 properties between High Street and Birds Avenue have their waste collected there. Luckily, the cars that often park there of an evening move by the morning collection, but permanent or potential bin storage and permanent parking will not. Secondly, us neighbours strongly feel that it's unfair for this area to be used for the waste of properties that are not even in sight of it. They're hidden around the back, you'll see in the pictures. Who will maintain this area? Who will be left to clear the debris? A building, yes, would have obstructed, but still these bin stores will inhibit the potential visibility splay. And this vast number of bins outside the front of our house will actually be a worse situation than a permanent building with the obstruction that would have caused. It's highly unlikely that people will only bring their bins on that long journey on collection day, especially dragging their bins out of a cul-de-sac and along a seriously potholey bridleway. The bins wouldn't survive it and people just won't bother. They'll likely be left in the presentation area and people will drive or walk their bags out. We strongly feel the presentation area should be allocated within the main plot of the main dwelling adjacent to the existing property, ensuring responsibility of the waste area and organisation within the main dwelling plot. We feel the reduction of safety and sight lines of the existing route for the wide range of daily users, which will only be more with the to and fro traffic, is absolutely unacceptable. The committee should consider their responsibility here carefully. They're simply trying to squeeze too much into this site with limited access without consideration of the residents. I'd like to propose the committee consider this solution, moving the bin store to with the patio or garden area of the old forge and reducing the 2 parking spaces out front to just 1, allowing the continued safe access and use by local residents. So they may have turning and parking space when this new traffic arrives, and emergency services and the waste collection route, which has always been, may continue to service us all. This is something that will be a requirement of a new property developer and is a small sacrifice for the gift of planning permission for multiple dwellings. Most potential objections could potentially be retracted if these steps were taken. We'd also like you to consider who will be responsible for repairing the impact all these additional users will have on the unadopted bridleway, a constant issue for us living there. Will KCC be adopting the new cul-de-sac and the bridleway section? These access elements that were mentioned were looked at in isolation. I don't think the bin collection was looked at in adjacent to the bridleway, adjacent to the traffic going through the building. That to me I read as all separate reports. And based on that, this plan situation is not as simple as it may appear on a drawn plan. The split sites impact on 40-odd plus neighbours, and the access and safety issues I explained need to be witnessed in person to be understood. I urge the committee to please conduct a site visit to see for themselves before making their decision. I'd also like to end with a question, if I may, regarding the bridleway section. Is there not a rule regarding public access routes that if they serve more than a certain number of properties, they need separate paths for pedestrians? Regarding the bridleway section from High Street to the main dwelling plot in question. Thank you.
Thank you. You did well in 3 minutes or just over, Ms Hart. Speaking as well, Councillor Boyd.
Good evening, everybody. I don't normally appear at planning, so apologies if I look a bit rusty. I'd like to thank Ms Hart. I have had several residents come forward expressing their concerns about the development. Obviously, my concerns and observations that I've passed on are referenced in your agenda pack. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read it. I know you've had a busy evening already. I do have a lot of concerns around the public bridleway, which is the link from the main roads to this site. I drove in it today. I say in it because it's full of holes today, just to double check it because it's been raining today. And my little Corsa, bless them, was really bumpy. I would thoroughly recommend that a site visit is undertaken, because I think when you look at Google Maps from a satellite view, you really won't understand the terrain that it is, and that it causes major issues. We have a lot of elderly people that live around there as well, so again, any more deterioration will be a health and safety risk in terms of falls. the site, because it's so far away from, not so far away, but it is from the main roads, and it is a small bridleway as well, I do have concerns as to the works traffic, large vehicles coming in and out. It is a bridleway used by horses, bikes and people, which obviously for their own physical and mental well-being. I wonder if any of those have actually been consulted around it and actually been pre-warned that that could be something that they're facing. I know that on page 133 it overall is considered that any harm is outweighed by the public benefits. However, it is only 4 houses. How much of that is really a benefit in terms of the local area? It also cites about allowing cars on the site to pass one another and to be able to freely manoeuvre. Again, that might be fine on the site, but getting to the site is the actual problem here. So I would really recommend it be deferred and go to a site visit, and I'm hoping that the plans that you see later tonight will explain that a little bit further. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. I'm going to hand over to Planning Officer, which is Annabelle, to explain her report.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So this is, excuse me, the 2 application sites that have been referred to outlined in red. So this is the old forge here with the larger garden area, which is where the dwellings would be located. And this is the red line area, which would be the car parking for the old forge and the bin presentation area. So you can see the high street here, and this is the access that we're referring to, and then you go off down towards the bridleway that's been referred to. So this is an aerial view of the site, so you can see the 2 distinct red-lined areas here again. So looking at this in more detail, and I'll look at some photographs in a moment to show members. So this is the old forge, this is 158 High Street, and this is the application site here, and this area here. So members might want to have a quick look at some of the elements you can see in this aerial view. For example, this element here of the old forge, which is the area that part of the building that will be demolished as part of the proposal. This is a rear extension to the adjoining property, and just to give you some bearings when we look at photographs within the garden, this is a little blue outbuilding within the current garden. So this is the access road here that comes into the site, and you can see a bit of the old forge to the rear of that photo. Another view of it, and you can see the side bit here, and this is the old forge, and this side element here that would be demolished as part of the proposal to create the access way. This is the sort of smaller red lined area that we've seen. So it would be car parking for 2 cars in this location and the bin presentation area. So this is looking at the old forge much closer up. You can see the edge of that blue car we saw in the previous photograph. So this would be the parking and bin presentation area to here. And this is the old forge, and this is the element here to the side that would be demolished. So again, looking at this, I'm now going to take you into the garden of the old forge, so the main sort of bit where the dwellings are proposed. So this is looking, you can see just the little blue building there, so we're looking down back towards the old forge and the neighbouring property there. This is looking to the corner of the application site, to the rear of the boundary. And again, another view, you can see the blue building we just mentioned earlier, and the other corner of the application site in the rear garden. And I'm now going to take you outside the site, so we're going to have a quick look at the bridleway and just a look around these areas here. So this is the bridleway and the field adjoining the site. And this is, again, the edge of the old forge, number 158, the blue car that we've seen in previous photographs, and the access as it wraps round. This is the flank wall of number 158, and this is the access road, and these properties and several others front Birds Avenue. So this is the existing site layout. So we've talked about the 2 red lines and the old forge is sitting here with its garden, and that's the parking area that's currently used by the old forge. And this is the proposed layout. So 2 parking spaces for the old forge within this smaller red line and the bin presentation area. The old forge with its side extension removed, the new access track, 4 new dwellings and 2 additional visitor spaces, and all of the dwellings are served by private garden areas and at least 2 vehicle spaces, and there is a garden area retained for the old forge in this location. So this is the old forge, the front elevation, and this is the side elevation we'll see in future plans that will be demolished. This is the rear elevation, so this conservatory and the bit above it will go. So the south elevation as existing and the north elevation as existing of the old forge. So this is the current ground floor plan of the old forge. So it's this area here that the application will demolish, and this is the first floor as existing. So this is the front elevation of the old forge as proposed. So this area here, as you can see dotted, yes, you can see it, will be the area demolished. So this is the south-facing elevation, again as proposed, the area dotted, demolished. And the north-facing elevation, where you can see the conservatory, is also gone, and then the rear-facing elevations, that whole area dotted and in sort of yellow is gone. These are the floor plans proposed of the old forge. So you still, that's the area demolished, so the lounge area and the conservatory, but it still is a good-sized family unit, and it still retains 3 bedrooms at first floor level. So looking again at this, I'll take you through into the sort of the site, and we'll look at the individual units, and we'll start with plot 1. Plot 1, as you can see, faces onto the access road. It has its rear garden facing onto the garden of the old, Forge Cottage 158. So looking at the ground floor plan, that's facing onto the access road. So it's got a open plan dining kitchen area, a lounge and utility in WC. And at first floor level, it's a 3-bedroom property, as they all are, with a bathroom and landing. That's the front elevation of the property, so as I say, facing onto the access road. And this is the rear north-facing elevation that will look towards the garden of number 158. You will note that this property actually sits, the closest point of the plot 1 sits some 19 metres away from the rear flank wall of the number 158. And it has 2 windows here in the rear elevation which serve an ensuite and a bathroom, and they will be obscure glazed to prevent any overlooking. This window here is a bedroom window, and that will be clear glazed to allow natural light and ventilation to serve the bedroom and the future occupiers. But it is some 26 metres from the rear of the rear flank wall of 158, and it is noted that the rear garden of 158 is actually overlooked by windows in properties on Birds Avenue in similar locations, so it's not considered that on balance there would be harm to the residential amenities of the occupiers of number 158 from overlooking from this property. And it is set back in from the boundary by the 6-metre garden that it serves this property. So there's the 2 flank elevations of that property, which you can see have no windows. So I'm now going to look at the properties, they run this way, 2, 3 and 4 that are proposed. So units 2 and 4 are identical, so they have the same elevations and floor plans. So they front onto that sort of turning head that we've just looked at. So that's the front elevation, the rear elevation there, and the south-facing elevations of plots 2 and 4, and the north-facing. Again, This is the ground floor, so they are identical. It's a similar layout as we've seen actually in Unit 1, open plan kitchen, but it runs into the lounge here, but WC and utility as well here. And again, a 3-bedroom property. And now we're just going to have a look at plot 3, which is slightly different as it's handed to plots 2 and 4 essentially. So that's the front of that unit, the rear of that unit, the 2 sides, and again it's a handed design of plots 2 and 4 essentially, so that's the ground floor. Excuse me, and a slightly different layout of the top floor, but it is still a 3-bedroom unit. So we have the bin presentation area, and as has been mentioned, it is anticipated that, well, it is meant that bins will be brought up on collection day only, and that they will be taken back down into the storage areas within the residential plots, and there would be parking for the old forge in that location we've seen where there is current parking now. So essentially we're looking at 4 units that have been previously approved, albeit on an outline approval, utilising the access that we're looking at here. It is not considered there will be any harm or congestion or impact on the bridle way that runs along here. There will be adequate space for the 4 units on the site. They will all be served, as I say, by private garden space and 2 parking and an amenity area reserved for the old forge itself. It is not considered there will be an adverse impact on the residential amenities or surrounding occupiers. And we have received a unilateral undertaking for the required SAM contribution. So the recommendation is to approve the application. We do have some swept paths as well that have been provided as issues have been mentioned about potential for the bin presentation area particularly to potentially cause problems with access around into past 158 and further on into the rear of the road properties that front Birds Avenue. And as you can see here, it is possible to progress and park, and the bin storage presentation area does not impact or harm that. So the officer recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annabelle. I move the officer's recommendation, as you hear, is for approval. Would Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Cook, members. Councillor Everett.
Well, I admire the ingenuity of the bin store proposal, but I don't think it's remotely credible. I don't really imagine that people are going to take their bins out there and only use that bin store once a week, and I struggle to see them taking them back and forth at all. I'd like to ask what the amenity space of Unit 3 is, because I couldn't quite work out where the garden areas were on that plan and what the size of that is. And I don't really understand the point that's been made about the use of the bridle way and its deterioration by vehicles in relation to this development. So I have to say, and I don't very often say this, I'm probably quite in favour of a site visit. But I hear what other members have got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Do you want to come back on that, Annabelle?
Yes, I can. The garden areas for plot 1, there's garden area for the old forge in this location here, that's retained. Plot 1, as I say, faces onto the access road, so its garden area is in this location here. Plot 4, yes, that is plot 4, sort of its garden area wraps around, and plot 3's garden is here, in this location, and plot 4 in this location. I don't know the measurements of the plots, of the amenity area offhand, but I could measure it if you were particularly interested. We don't have an actual size restriction or limit for garden spaces, but they do look adequate to serve a family dwelling.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Wing.
Did the vehicle sweep path analysis, did it involve waste vehicle-sized vehicles? Because obviously they've got to collect the bins. And is there any separation, physical separation, between the unadopted access road, and I have experience of those at the back of my property, and the bridle path? Because that would be a concern, because if there isn't any separation, then where does one start and one begin? There are two questions, please.
Yes, sure. Taking the second one first, there is an actual fence going to be proposed, and that is conditioned for details of that to come forward along the edge of the access road to separate it from the bridleway. So that will be that. And sorry, I've forgotten.
It was the vehicle sweep analysis. Did it involve waste vehicle-sized vehicles?
Well, it has been brought to our attention that the refuge is actually collected by a smaller vehicle already that uses the site, and that it did count for that smaller size vehicle. It's not the big 13 normal vehicle that you see. It comes around in and uses these roads, so it's a smaller vehicle currently, and yes, that would be able to be accommodated.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, we're forgetting Councillor Alban again a few times. He's invisible tonight.
Have I missed him again?
Yes.
Don't worry.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Everett here. I am a little confused about the potholed road and quite the impact of it, and unless that can somehow be clarified for me here, I think a site visit may well be of considerable benefit.
Thank you. It's not deliberate, Councillor Alban, I can assure you.
That's all right, Chair. I can live with it. To go back to what Councillor Everett has said about the triangle of land there, I mean, it's bonkers, isn't it? You know, so, I mean, if I lived in one of those houses down the bottom, you think I'm dragging my bin all the way up there, you've got another thing coming. Yeah. And I don't think anybody would want to. Well, whenever, you know, especially when it's hot as well, you don't want to drag all your bin up there, would you? But the development in itself, the houses, all of that, it's a good development. Whether you could refuse it on the grounds of the where the bin store is, I have extreme doubt about that. But it's, I mean, you'd know if you moved there that that's where your bin store is. So again, I'm reluctant, but I would. Yeah, I'd welcome a site visit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. I was going to say that you're not as young as you used to be, but...
No, that's quite true, Chair. If I could, if we're going for a site visit, Chair, we've not got to go by horse down the bridleway, have we?
I can't say a word. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, can you just show that swept path analysis again? I just wanted to clarify one thing. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I thought so. So it's dependent on one of those car parking spaces for the old forge being empty, isn't it? So on bin day, the old forge will have to be knocked up to move their car if they're parked there.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I do agree with other members. I think it's a fine development, but I do think that the bin arrangement is not particularly viable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think one of the reasons they've put that bin storage collection point there is because it's an unadopted road, and I don't think the waste collection team will go down there to pick up those bins. So it's down the onus for the residents to take their bins to the collection point so that they can be emptied. And again, the issues will be there depending on what they put down as the access road, be it gravel or whatever, will make things even worse. And I agree, unfortunately, with my colleagues on the other side there that I don't think it's a viable thing to be doing. And I think a site visit would be important because of the access to the bridleway. So I'd be in favour of a site visit as well. But I think the reason the bin collection point is there is because it's unadopted and the waste collection team don't have permissions or to go down there and pick it from the house. So it would have to be brought to the end of the road, and that's why it's there. But I think that's the grey areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other speakers? I don't see any other speakers. Councillor Orban.
Sorry, just a question, Chair. If I could ask Mr Livingston, providing the bin storage area is what is required, and we require that on any development such like that, would it not be very unusual to refuse a planning application on the grounds that there is bin storage, but it's not in the right place?
Yes. I think that just sorry to be a bit flippant there. I think it is as Councillor Moore pointed out. It's about having to locate the bin storage so that it's used by the refuse team that come down that road at the moment. So there is a challenge here in terms of what is in our view an acceptable site of housing development, and indeed outline approval being granted, but how the bin storage works. Obviously, you could look at it. Individuals, as you say, may not bring the bin back every single time, but also obviously to actually put waste out, you would have to go and take your waste to your bin, which is obviously down the driveway. So there are bin storage areas obviously within each private residential property as well, because obviously that's where you would take your bin out, every odd day or whatever it is. But indeed, it is something on its own that certainly in our view wouldn't substantiate a reason for refusal. It's something that could potentially be looked at if members were minded for a site visit to be discussed again, hearing the debate and seeing what options there are available, if any, to change the proposal.
Yep. Thank you, Ian. Councillor Crittenden.
One thought that did occur to me was, can we move the parking for the old forge to somewhere else and just leave the bin store there?
I thought Councillor Garner.
Yeah, I just wanted to check something. The outline permission has been mentioned a couple of times. I mean, that was 2018 was granted, wasn't it? So how live is that outline permission?
Yeah, come back.
It's not. So it's not extant. You have to put reserved matters in within 3 years of the outline coming in, and it wasn't put in. I think that the importance of the outline is more in the sense of, obviously, the principle of housing on the site. So that the local plan framework, whilst it's changed, obviously we've got a 2020 local plan, with the various changes, the site is even more acceptable for housing effectively by virtue of a combination of this being within the urban confines now. It's surrounded by the strategic allocation. It's not within it, just to be clear, but in the Westgate and Garlinge strategic allocation. So it's not an extant permission at the moment, though.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Well, just going back to Councillor Garner's point, surely the swept path analysis is useless if it involves travelling over a parking space which may well be occupied when it's required.
Yeah.
Just to come back on that point, vehicles aren't required necessarily. The swept path analysis, the actual refuse vehicle isn't expected to turn around in this area. It would come out one end and go out the other end of Birds Avenue. So yes, it's been shown again that turning could happen if there was no vehicle there, but it's not an expectation that turning is needed for the refuse vehicle. It's primarily that is to show that actually you can get the refuse vehicle round where the bins presentation area is, around the access point, because obviously there was some concern that was raised about if you've got bins there, can you actually just get a vehicle round the corner, not necessarily about turning around.
Thank you. I'm going to stop debate there. Put this to you. It is the application is for approval, but I am listening to what's been said. So those in favour of approval, could they please show? Those against? Right. I need a proposal now. I thought you might, Councillor Orban. Site visit, a seconder please, Councillor Bayford. There's several. So those agree, site visit, 31st of March, 9:30.
Sorry, who was the second there? You kind of went a bit past me.
Me, sorry.
Who was the second?
Councillor Bayford. Thank you, members. Item 6C, land rear of 20 to 22 Westfield Road, Birchington. I have a couple of speakers here. Speaking against this application is Councillor Hudson, who I believe still is the chairman of, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor of Birchington Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things on the report before you. Firstly, Westfield Road is not in Westgate, which it says in a paragraph in the report. It is actually in Birchington. And the effect of this development will have little or no effect on the neighbouring cottages in Westfield Road, apart from the fact that if people want to go in by parking their cars outside 20 or 22 Westfield Road, there are parking restrictions, and it's unlikely, because it's virtually a cul-de-sac, that they'd be able to park there for any length of time. The main objections come from the rear of the site, which comes onto Oxney Close. Now, Oxney Close is one of three closes that were put in when the Gardens estate was first developed, and I know it was some 60 or 70 years ago, but each of those closes, at the end of them, have an alleyway or footpath that allows people to get into the town. And they are very, very well used. The estate was pretty much originally built for retirees, and that's the sort of people that are there at the moment, and they do their shopping by going up the passageway. So in Oxney Close, six bungalows, road narrow, very narrow, is acknowledged in the report. It is narrow. If waste vehicles go up and down the road, which they do, there's no room for them for any other traffic on the road. It is hopeless. And it is Westfield Road, Oxney Close that is really affected. There is no real turning circle at the end of the close, and the Oxney Close has got traffic restrictions on both sides of the roads. So that is a major problem. It's a major problem for construction of the site. Building vehicles, we know they're quite large, they're quite difficult, and they wouldn't be able to get up there easily to work on the site. The effect on people within the near area with mobility issues, I've already mentioned that they use the footpath to go up into the town. That is difficult, and there are a lot of mobility scooters and that used in Birchington. Other concern that residents have is the public services, mains water, wastewater, etc., because of the design of the close. That is a worry. Worried about emergency services getting up there, the same objections with the waste vehicles. Be interested to know if people have actually visited the site and understand what the situation is. I think that's preceded the points that are made by the residents, and it is of great concern to them, believe me. I understand that if planning permission is granted for development, it has to be capable of being implemented. Officers will advise on that, but given the restraints on the site, I wonder if it could be implemented if they can't deliver building materials to the site and they obey the road traffic conditions, which I also see in the report. That's somebody else's problem. And I understand that's easy to say, that's somebody else's problem. But I'm sure most members will understand that environmental considerations for planning and parking is very difficult to control. Certainly out in the villages it is. So we're worried about that.
Councillor
I'm nearly
Hudson,
there.
all right.
If you...
For me to tell you off, that's quite unusual.
I know, if you do pursue this, I do believe construction management plans need to be submitted to know how they are going to develop the site. I'm totally opposed to the site. Many of my colleagues are as well. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your patience, members.
No, thank you, Councillor Hudson. Speaking under Council Procedure 20.1 is Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I might duplicate a few things that Councillor Hudson said, but I'll say them again anyway. I've spoken a number of times at this committee, sometimes for, sometimes against, but this application really is the most opportunistic profiteering that I've come across, in my opinion. So I'm surprised it's up for approval this evening. I believe the applicant owns both 20 and 22 Westfield Road, and now wants to take a slice of each of the small back gardens from each property and build another house. The Westfield Road address is very misleading, as the property proposed will actually be in Oxney Close. Oxney Close is a very small cul-de-sac off Kent Gardens, consisting of a few small bungalows. It's very narrow, single-file road with yellow line, restricted parking. There's no daytime parking there at all. Most residents use Oxney Close as a cut-through between the Gardens estate, where a lot of our elder residents live, as a pedestrian right-of-way to the village. And I think there's some concerns about the closure of the right-of-way during the construction of the building. To build another house in Oxley Close will lead to a very cramped feel to an already small, quiet close. There's been numerous objections to the planning application. There's quite a few on the website. I'm sure members have seen them all. The objections include overdevelopment, too close to adjoining properties, inadequate parking provision, not complying with the local plan. Development is in the turning area for Oxley Close, removal of trees, loss of privacy, lack of concern by the applicant on neighbours, surface water runoff after building on the back gardens, an unsympathetic design, to name a few. Mr Chairman, I've always been opposed to garden developments of any type, and this one is no different. I'm going to ask my colleagues here this evening to refuse permission for this application. If they feel they can't refuse, then I ask for members to go and have a site visit and have a look for themselves to see what the issues are there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. Ask the officer, which is Emma, to give the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the application site outlined in red here. So the area outlined in blue is numbers 20 and 22 Westfield Road. So Westfield Road is at the top of this slide, and then Oxney Close, which is a cul-de-sac, is located here below the site, and then the application is for the redevelopment of this area here at the end of the cul-de-sac. So this is just an aerial view of the site. So you can see there's the gardens of numbers 20 and 22 in this location here. There's an existing garage within the rear of this property, which would be demolished in order to make way for the proposed dwelling. You can see in terms of the actual street, there are existing bungalows. You can see there are pairs of semi-detached and detached bungalows within this small cul-de-sac area. And this is the application site here. So this garage falls within one of the gardens within the application site, and then the area extends off to the left here. So it covers this area behind this brown fence area here. So it's both of these gardens being developed for a single dwelling. And then a further view back. So you can see on the left-hand side here, this is 5 Oxney Close. And then a further view here again. So again, the application site is this area here, this garden and this garden. And then again, a further view. This is now over to number 6 Oxney Close. Again, you can see both of them, both the neighbouring properties are existing bungalows. This garage falls within the rear garden of number 24 Westfield Road. So this doesn't fall within the application site. And the public right-of-way that was referred to is in this location here, to the right of number 24. Then this view is looking back towards the other end of the cul-de-sac. So the application site is behind us, looking towards the junction here. And again, you can see the single-storey nature of the dwellings in the road. And then this view is just taken from the other end, looking back towards the application sites. The application site is in this location here, to the rear of the semi-detached properties. And then another view here. So these are the properties that front onto Westfield Road. So these are numbers 20 and 22. So the existing properties in which the dwelling would be built within the garden area. And again here. So what's useful to see within these photos is just the fact that they have existing parking areas to the front of those properties off Westfield Road. So whilst there's a garage located at the rear of one of the gardens, that's not the only parking area serving these units. The parking's actually located to the front of the units as well from Westfield. So this is the existing plan showing the existing sites. You can see there are currently two long gardens. There's the garage is located in this area here. You can also see the public right-of-way in this location here. You can see that within Oxney Close there's a small turning head which would not be suitable for larger refuge vehicles but would be suitable for smaller cars and delivery lorries. This area is not being touched through the application, so the application solely is for the area within the garden area and would not change the nature of that turning head. So this is the proposed plan. So you can see here the hatched area is the outline of the footprint of the proposed dwelling. So it's an L-shaped dwelling. The original plan that came in did extend the dwelling further with a carport in this location here, but this plan has been amended to remove the carport area in order to increase the space and garden area around the unit. And this is a closer view of the block plan. So again, you can see the footprint of the unit in this location here. This area to the front would provide parking for two vehicles off-site, so they'd both be able to, vehicles would be able to park off the site, not disturbing the turning head. And then this area here would be the garden to serve the unit, which is a two-bed unit, therefore requiring doorstep play space. So this area here would be enclosed with a 1.8 metre fence. Then this is an elevation view of the proposed bungalow. So it's quite a shallow roof. In terms of the height of the building, it's 2.4 metres up to eaves level, which is the height of the existing garage on the site. So the only addition is the actual pitch roof above in terms of height level, and at the highest point it reaches 4 metres. The lower area here is 3.4 metres. You can see it's a brick and tiles for the unit, and this area here on the left is set back, so there's just a main projecting gable to the front here. This is the rear elevation with obscure glazed windows looking back towards the pair of semi-detached dwellings. So there's no concerns with any overlooking given the obscure glazed nature of these windows. And then this is the side view. So Oxney Road is on the right-hand side here, and you can see part of one of the neighbouring properties. You can see the setback from the road, and again the shallow form of the unit. And then this is the other view. So again, Oxney Road now is on the left-hand side, and you can see the side elevation of the proposed unit here. So this is the floor plan just showing the unit. So it's a two-bed unit, so 2 bedrooms and the bathroom area here, and a large open plan lounge kitchen area to the front of the site. And again, you can see more detail the 2 parking spaces to the front and the garden on the left-hand side here. And then the roof plan. And then this is just sections showing the existing situation to the top. So I think this glass house is actually in a neighbouring property. So, but what this is showing is the current distance from the existing semi-detached properties to the nearest neighbour in Oxney Close on the left. And then the bottom view is showing the height of the proposed unit in relation to the neighbours. So you can see it's a lower property than the existing properties in Oxney Close. It's a very modest size building, and you can see the distance between the proposed unit and the semi-detached units back in Westfield Road. So the main considerations are the impact on the character and appearance of the area and living conditions and highway safety. So I'll just go back to the proposed layout. In terms of the site, it's a rear garden area. It's within the urban confines, so there's no principal objection to the development of the site for a single dwelling, subject to the impact on the character and appearance of the area and other material considerations being acceptable. In terms of the character and appearance of the area, as you can see, it's a cul-de-sac that consists of semi-detached and detached bungalows. This is a proposed bungalow. It's it's a modest sized unit, it's at the head of the cul-de-sac, it would fit in with the existing character of the area and the existing pattern of development, so there's no significant concerns regarding the impact of this on the visual amenities of the area. The unit's set back from the road, so there's a frontage, so again similar in character to the other neighbouring properties, and there's space maintained around the unit with the side garden area, which means it's considered to be an adequate sized plot to fit a single unit upon. In terms of the impact upon neighbours, the distance to the neighbours in Oxney Close, there's 11.5 metres to number 5, 11 metres to number 6, which is in the bottom of the slide here. Both these distances, given the fact it's single-storey in nature, are not considered to impact on any light or outlet to those properties. In terms of the impact to the properties in Westfield, there's a distance of 9.4 metres to the closest point of the neighbouring property, and you can see on the plan here there's that they maintain a garden of at least 10 metres in depth to the rear of the properties, which is considered acceptable in terms of that garden size for those properties, and in terms of, again, that distance to the impact on their windows. There's no overlooking, given the fact that it's only single storey, and the rear windows would be obscure glazed looking back towards the neighbours. So the impact on living conditions is acceptable, and it meets the space standards and achieves the doorstep play space that's required by policy. In terms of the actual impact on highway safety, the site has 2 off-street parking spaces, which is considered appropriate. There's access to it, and there would be adequate visibility from those spaces into the road. The turning head is being maintained, and whilst it is appreciated that there would potentially be some concern from construction traffic, it is usually standard that we would put on a construction management plan condition onto a consent. So if members were concerned with that, we could add that on as a condition, requiring details of the construction to come in through that plan, and that could also look at the public right of way and how the actual access for that is maintained during construction. So that is something that could be added, and we could seek details on. But otherwise, it's not considered there would be any significant harm to highway safety from this additional dwelling, and the parking is appropriate, and there's additional cycle parking provided within the site as well. So it is recommended to be deferred and delegated, subject to the legal agreement to come in for the SPA contribution to be secured, and subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation. Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I've got to say I don't see a lot wrong with it, to be honest with you. I think the fact that there's already a garage access onto Oxney Close is quite persuasive of the suitability of vehicular access onto Oxney Close. I can't see the difference between a car coming out of one garage, which you could potentially do at the moment, and 2 parking spaces is of any substance. I do think that it will be a good idea to add the extra condition that Emma's referred to. I'd like to propose that, but subject to that, I think it's acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Councillor Garner.
Yeah, I would just like a bit of clarification about the car parking spaces, because I'm finding it difficult to visualise where exactly they would go, and that's sort of also in relation to the house or the bungalow at the top left there has a car that goes in and out of a driveway right adjacent to the proposed new garden, and that would obviously need to come all the way out without being hindered by anything, so as it can turn round. And I can't quite see how 2 cars are going to fit on fit on there without hindering it. So if you could just sort of explain that a bit to me, please.
So on the plan here, you can see, I don't know if you can see actually, it's quite faint, but there's a faint outline of 2 vehicles within this front garden area here. So one is parked in this location here, where you can see quite a deep area of driveway, and the other is a parallel parking space in this location here, which is something that KCC are starting to accept as appropriate if there's enough distance from the front elevation of the property. So for number 5, they would still be able to turn into their driveway in this location here, and then for reversing out, they'd be able to reverse into the turning head and turn out. And this area shouldn't be obstructed because there's adequate space within the front here for the 2 vehicles to park in these 2 locations without overhanging the highway.
Thank you. Do I see any other hands? Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not in favour of this development because it is a rear garden development, and to me it impacts severely on Oxley Close. They've tried to make it look as nice as possible, but the fact that you've got a car driving in a car on the side, I can see nothing but problems there with that, and I wouldn't be for this approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands? Excuse me a moment. Just a little bit of advice from Mr. Livingston. You've seen, put a motion to you that has been suggested about the movement of traffic and so forth from Councillor Everett to be added to the report. I would like to propose that, and I'll ask the Vice Chair to second. If you agree.
I'll second that, Chair.
I'm looking at members. You heard Councillor Everett, so I think it makes sense as well. So those in favour of... Yep. Okay. Yep. Ian.
So just to confirm, the motion that was put forward was to defer and delegate for approval, as we talked about at the start of the meeting. The condition that's been mentioned, which was mentioned by Emma as well, is a construction management plan condition. So this is a standard condition that we've put on other applications. So it would be, the recommendation is still to defer and delegate for approval subject to securing the legal agreement. And it's got the safeguarding conditions in the report at the moment, but it would be to add a construction management plan condition as well.
Thank you. You obviously members understand. Yep. Anybody else wish to speak before I put this to the vote? Councillor Wing.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? So if we defer and delegate, does it come back here for us to have another view?
No.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
No. Okay, members, those in favour is defer and delegate, but please show. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? That has been carried. Thank you, members. Righto, members, thank you. Moving on again to agenda item 6D, 75 Gloucester Avenue in Margate. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, if you're there.
Okay, please bear with me, I'm petrified. Sorry for the inconvenience to all, right? I didn't think I needed planning permission to erect these gates, as there was always existing wall around my property of 2 metres high. My only intention was to make, it was dated, so basically
Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry I'm butting in. Can you move a little bit closer to your mic?
Okay, sorry.
Or move the mic.
I didn't know what you got up to then.
No, that's, thank you. Carry on.
I'll start again. Sorry for the inconvenience to all, but I can't just give up. I'm very sorry. I've had nervous breakdowns today because of this. I'm here today about these gates. Yeah, my house is 75 Gloucester Avenue. I just can't do it. I'm sorry. I can't do it.
Please don't worry.
You can try and read it for me. Good, please, yeah. Whenever I try to read it, I sound like a robot. I'm a painter and decorator. This is not what I do.
Please don't worry.
This is.
That is fine. Councillor Fellows, I believe you're going to read.
This is like. Go on, read it for me.
Yeah, I'll read it out.
Send the bill. Okay, thank you.
He's saying, sorry for the inconvenience to all, but I didn't think I would need permission to erect these gates, as there was already an existing wall around the property at 2 metre high. His only intention was to improve the look of the frontage by replacing the concrete block wall, connecting the garage to the surrounding wall with gates, and by doing so we could make better use of the front garden. When he bought the property, it was with the understanding that we clearly need modernisations, and the gates were part of that investment. He did speak with his neighbours prior to the change, without any negative feedback. In fact, they all said they would do the same if it was their theirs, as the old concrete and pebble dash was ugly. They were also happy as it meant they could use the whole front garden to park rather than just the driveway. His partner and he both have a car and also has a works van, a classic car and a boat, which are now stored off-road, giving clear view of Princess Walk and the sea. He's also arranged for the bland 1990s pebble dash to be rendered and painted to improve the appearance. Have you got some more? Oh, that's it. Have you got another? Have you got page 2?
My dad read this.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows.
An appearance of the wall, unlike the block brick wall opposite with its flaking paint. Finally, these gates would provide added security for our pet dog, a Bordeaux Mastiff, from getting out or frightening any passers-by by her size. Once again, he's sorry for the drama correcting these gates has caused everyone, but he does hope that you will accept this change. Hasn't had any negative impact on the aesthetics or character of the road and area.
And so thank you, Councillor Fellows. Well done. And don't worry, Mr. Morgan, it gets to us all, I can assure you. Okay, I'm going to ask Emma to give the report, please. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. This is the application site in this area here. So this is Gloucester Avenue and Palm Bay Avenue to the top of this slide. And these are the gates. So it's a retrospective application. It's for the gates that are 1.8 metres in height. You can see in terms of the design that they include solid panels. They have a dark coloured finish. And this is the view further down the road. So you can see this is the existing side elevation. So these are the this is the walls that the applicants referred to as having recently been rendered. And then this is the neighbouring property with their wall, which again, both of these have historically been in situ. So these haven't. There's no evidence of any planning permissions for these, but they've been there for a long time, looking back on the history. So these are lawful walls now in terms of this height. And this is the view down Gloucester Avenue. So you can see in terms of our concerns, the area is very open. All the properties are very open with very low boundary walls to the front of the site. You can see very, very open in terms of the character. And so the concern would be any high boundary walls to the front of the properties would appear out of keeping with this open character of the area. This is looking back towards Palm Bay Avenue. So you can see there is some evidence of high boundary walls at the end of this road, but these walls tend to contain the actual private rear garden areas or side garden areas of the properties and aren't generally consistent with the front boundary treatment of properties. So you can see again here that on the corner there's a property that has a low wall, and then the railings above are quite open, so it allows you to still get a sense of looking into the site and feeling like a sense of openness rather than being very enclosed. So the gates are in this location here on the front of the site, on the left-hand side of the site. And again, these are now the details of it, which you saw in the photos. And there's a pedestrian gate on the right-hand side, and then a vehicular gate on the left. And then again, a view of that. So this application has previously been submitted and refused. The grounds being to do with the height, design and location of the gates, creating a stark and highly prominent feature which is incongruous with the open character of the surrounding area. So this application is a resubmission. There's no change in the actual details that have been submitted. So it's therefore recommended for refusal again on those same grounds. I'll just show you a view of how the site was previously. So this is a historic Google image that we have found of how the site looked prior to the gates being erected and the wall being rendered. So you can see this area was open, there was no gates in this location, and you could sort of get a sense of openness looking into the site. So whilst the actual wall itself is quite high, this area maintained openness in keeping with the area. So the concern is that the gates now enclose that and create a fully solid frontage. That does detract from the area, so it's recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I recommend the officer's recommendation, which you've heard is refusal. The Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. A few hands going up. Councillor Towning. Yeah, don't worry, mine goes blank.
I am the ward councillor for this area. The the gates actually provide for this family privacy, security, not just for themselves, but they have some very special dogs. And not so long ago, unfortunately for them, they lost a dog because it got out of the house and unfortunately they lost. What we've got to remember is that there's not a single neighbor that has actually objected to these particular gates. If you look at that side at that street, Gloucester Avenue, and if you go up towards North Down Road, I mean the view we saw down the street was towards the sea. But if we go the other way, you will find that there are fences much higher than that. There are different gates along that street. So, you know, there's nothing about those gates that are unappealing. There's nothing about the gates that are unusual. In fact, it helps the property to give them a bit more sort of privacy to the home. As far as the parking issue goes, they're parking their cars now off the street, so it's not adding to any street parking. So it's in general terms, it's a benefit to everyone living around that house. So I would ask my colleagues over here to refuse the proposal by the officers and approve the application to leave the gates where they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townend. Councillor Rozeski.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined, actually, looking at the pictures of the walls beforehand and everything, to agree with Councillor Towning here and say that actually the gates don't look that bad. They're only 1.8 metres. It gives the house the security it requires. Everyone's entitled to a bit of security nowadays, and I don't see any problem with it. I'll be looking to, again, go against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I went down and had a look at it this afternoon, and as Councillor Townend has said, when you come down Gloucester Avenue from North Down Road, on the left-hand side there's a monstrosity of a wooden fence which comes out, comes along, goes back in, comes along, comes back out. Carcelated. It's a monstrosity. Whether that's got planning consent or not, I do not know. But having come down here and had a look at that, it has no impact whatsoever on the local amenity of the area, and I certainly can't agree with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Portmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Having looked at both the picture prior and existing now, what the occupant has done is made that a striking building and improved the quality of it, and I see no reason why he can't have that gate, so I will be voting against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Shrub.
As another ward councillor, I had to look round there today and the other day. No, you wouldn't. And I tell you what, that's an improvement on what was there before, going by the other pictures, and I will be going against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Shrub. Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I think the decisive factor for me is the height of the existing wall. Whether that wall was ever put up without planning consent in the first place, the fact that the wall's there and conceals a lot of the front of the property in the first place makes it much less of a change than it would be if the wall wasn't there, obviously. I mean, I don't think we would want all the properties along that road to wall themselves in that way, but that isn't what's in front of us, because that certainly would change the character of the area. And I do have some sympathy with the officers bringing it forward for refusal, but I think on balance, because of the height of the wall, I think we probably have to let it go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. I don't see any other hands. You've heard the officer's recommendation, which is refusal. Those in favour of that, please raise your hands. Those against officer's recommendation, Right, that has been lost. So bear with me a moment, please. Yep, come back to Ian.
So it's quite clear that members consider that the development wouldn't harm the character and appearance of the area, and obviously if a member wants to propose approval on the basis that it doesn't harm the character and appearance of the area, then that's what
Thank
we
you.
suggest.
Councillor Shrub, he couldn't get his hand up quick enough there. Councillor
I recommend approval. On the grounds of the fact that there's nothing wrong with it, and it all fits in quite nicely.
I know it's getting late.
And also safety, because if their dogs get out again.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Rozeski, I believe you want to second. Thank you. I'm not going to ask Councillor Orban to do that dance he did just now, but those in favour of that proposal? Okay, anyone against? No, obviously that has been carried, including myself. Thank you. Thank you, members. Your last item on this evening's agenda is item 6E, which is number 60 to 68 High Street, 1 in Ramsgate and 1 to 11 George Street, Ramsgate, on the corner. And speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Matthew Gerlich. I hope I've said that right. Garlick?
No, but it doesn't matter. Everyone gets it wrong.
I beg your pardon. So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. We would like to thank the Planning Committee for this opportunity to speak at the meeting. We at JDP Limited firstly wanted to outline our current redevelopment proposals for Ramsgate. This basically focuses on the redevelopment of existing buildings located within the town centre. These buildings are typically dilapidated and are either suitable for conversion or extension, or in the current case require demolition and redevelopment of the site. JDP are already redeveloping another site in Ramsgate and will hopefully deliver 31 1- and 2-bedroom apartments at the former Sports Direct site. As well as providing much needed sustainable residential accommodation, the development will also provide more sustainable commercial units, which will be aimed at the independent community users. We would like to point out to the committee that the decision for Sports Direct to pull out of the site was theirs alone. They, like other large companies, are pulling out the high street in their droves. JDP are already in discussions with other smaller independents about renting the newly converted retail spaces, which is a real positive and hopefully justification of the current model. We acknowledge that there have been several negative comments made pertaining to the scheme. In our opinion, most of these comments require political solution or response. However, we have completely addressed all of the matters necessary to demonstrate policy compliance and consider our proposals are completely in accordance with the MPPF and the local plan requirements. We have, in our opinion, done our best with this site, and if it was to be approved, would deliver on much needed sustainable and affordable accommodation within the town centre. It is true that no car parking provision has been incorporated within the proposals. The committee are reminded that the site lies in a totally sustainable position for public transport, but is also directly adjacent to Meeting Street public car park and also close to other underutilised car parks located in Cannon Road, Leopold Street and Staffordshire Street. JDP are totally committed to future requirements of any current tenants that have approached us expressing an interest to remain at these or any other premises within the JDP portfolio. JDP are proactively looking at options available for Pilgrim's Hospice for this alternative sites. Similar arrangements would be offered to all tenants if a formal approach were to be received, but we can categorically confirm that this has not been the case. We hope that committee agrees with officers and supports the redevelopment of this site by approving the current proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try again. Mr. Gerlach. Thank you. Speaking against the application under Council Procedure 20.1 is Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, there's a great deal to like about this application. The design is a massive improvement on what we have at the moment and fits in much better with the conservation area. It provides a variety of small shop units, which is one of the things we really need, having empty big box shops in the town centre where the owners won't divide them into the small units that we need. It's providing housing. It's a brownfield site in the town centre. It's providing housing, and it's providing the sort of housing that we need, which is 1 and 2 bedroom flats. There are all the heritage provisions, the sustainability provisions are all excellent. What I think is worrying ward councillors and is worrying local residents is the number of flats. It appears to be considerably overdeveloped. 39 flats in this relatively small block is a hell of a lot. And by far the majority of those are 1 bedroom flats, so there doesn't appear to us to be much of a balance between different types of accommodation. It's 32 1 bedroom flats, 5 2 bedroom, 2 3 bedroom. We feel that is overcrowded. We're looking at a very high density of single person accommodation or single bedroom flats. The fact that there are no affordable units in the building is a real concern, because Ramsgate is not the best off town in the world and we really need accommodation for our local residents. So the pricing structure is a worry. I am no expert on viability appraisals and whatever. In fact, I'm no expert on planning at all. But actually the comparison flats that have been chosen in the viability appraisal look, if you're in Surrey, as the appraisers were, very close, but actually they're the opposite side of town. And I would have to say that they're in a particularly exclusive area because they happen to be at the top of my street. But they're certainly in a very different sort of area. They're not in a town centre location. We're really worried that there aren't any affordable units in this proposal. Mr. Gerlach has referred to the parking issue, and obviously we know that there's no requirement for there to be parking, but there are concerns that there isn't any parking. And although we do have the very good loop bus system in serving Ramsgate, it doesn't really serve that part of the town centre, so we would be looking at people trying to park in the relatively limited car park spaces available. And finally, it would have been lovely to see the developers doing what they're trying to do, for example, with the Sports Direct building, and take an existing building and do something with it, rather than knock the whole thing down and start again. Not because the existing building is beautiful and needs to be preserved, because it certainly doesn't, but because of the embodied carbon. We're concerned about there's a lot of sustainability work has gone into this, but there's a real concern about the environmental implications of total demolition, let alone the practical implications of the disruption that it will cause. So in general, we like the idea that this is what's going to happen, but we have some serious concerns about the number of units, the overcrowding, and some other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I'll ask Annabelle, I believe now, the planning officer, to outline her report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red. I'll zoom in here. This is an easier plan to see. So this is the application site here on the corner of the High Street and George Street. Just to give you some bearings, this is Colette House, which is a block of flats, and this is Meeting Street and the Meeting Street car park here, and obviously the High Street running along here. So just an aerial view of the site, so you can easily see Meeting Street car park here, and this is the application site that wraps around in this location here. Just some photographs of the site. This is looking down the High Street. You can see the site here in this location. This is a view of part of the site. As you can see, it's a fairly modern sort of 20th century building. And this is number 70 High Street, and that is actually a listed building. So looking at the corner as it turns in George Street and the High Street, we are looking at a building that's in the Ramsgate Conservation Area. and the Ramsgate Conservation Area appraisal was actually adopted in March 2022, and it's identified as lying within Character Area 2, which is the historic commercial core, and it's actually identified in that appraisal as being an unsympathetic 20th century commercial units, and identified as an opportunity for enhancement. So if we look at some more photographs, that's looking up George Street, so you can see it turning the corner here and it drops down in height in that location here. So that's the bit where it drops down, and this is number 13 George Street. And this is looking back the other way, so you can see the lower bits here and the bit where it turns the corner back into the high street. This is actually of the rear of the site, so you're looking at number 70, the listed building here, and this is the site here, and I'm obviously taking it from the Meeting Street car park. This is a closer view, so you can see the edge of the site here, and number 70, and you can see there's a rear extension to that listed building here, which is, as we understand it, in residential use. And this is looking to the rear of properties in George Street, so this is the application site in this location here. This is number 13, 15 and 17, and you can just see the edge of Colette House, which is the larger block of flats in that location. So this is the existing high street elevation, so this is George Street going off in this location here. So this is the existing elevation you'll see from the high street. This is the listed building that's been talked about, number 70, so it's 3 stories, also of a mansard roof here. And this is the proposed high street elevation, so again George Street will be sitting, goes off here, and you can see you've got commercial units on the ground floor here and residential above going up into the mansard roof. This is the existing George Street elevation, so you're turning the corner, and that's number 13 George Street here. And this is a proposed George Street elevation. So it's commercial as you turn the corner into George Street. That's the last commercial unit. And then it goes into residential, which is appropriate in George Street because that's not within the town centre, but obviously the high street part is. So you're keeping the active uses at ground floor in the high street elevation and moving to more residential even on the ground floor as you turn into George Street. So this is the rear of the George Street elevation, so that's actually number 13 you can see there, and that's the bit we looked at in the photograph. And this is what's proposed, so that's number 13 here, and again you can see the units there are coming up. And this is the rear of the High Street elevation, so that's the photograph we looked at taken from the Meeting Street sort of car park. That's number 70 with its rear addition here. And this would be, excuse me, the proposed elevation to the rear of the High Street. So you can see the mansard roof, and again the relationship with number 70 there, so there is the gap between the roofs there. So this is the existing ground floor plan, so you can see number 13 George Street there, number 70, and as we've seen it's a variety of commercial uses that sort of wrap round currently there, and that's the existing first floor plan, and you can see there's that area where it drops down, so that's flat roofed. And so this is a proposed ground floor plan, so you've got the 4 commercial units that front the high street in this location here, then you have the 5th commercial unit in this location here, and then we have 2 flats that front George Street in this location, another flat here, a cycle store that serves the residential development, and a bin store that also serves the actual residential development with the commercial bin store, each commercial unit having their own bin stores separately. There is also an amenity space here that again serves the residential units, and this is again a bin presentation area, so bins can be transported on the day they're due to be collected into that area and then returned back into the bin store. So looking at the floors as we go up, it is a series of residential units set against around, as I say, and now we're looking at all residential above on these floors. It's a similar pattern on the second floor. And again, we're now in the mansard roof with accommodation in that area as well. And that's the proposed actual roof plan. So just to give you some idea of some heights of the building, there's the section as existing, so that's actually from the high street, so you can see number 70 there with its mansard roof, and that's the sort of scale of building you're looking at currently. This was the proposed section, so you can see how the floors come into play. So you'd have the commercial units on the ground floor here, the two residential floors, and then the mansard roof there, and you can see it is a similar height to number 70, and it gives more of a presence in officers' opinion as it turns the corner. And so you're looking at the rear elevation, it's existing to the rear of George Street, so that's number 13 again. And this actually gives you a bit of a close-up of the proposed rear elevation. Again, the same elevation looking onto it with number 13. So you can see the mansard roof. This is the bin storage and things that we looked at in the proposed development. And again, this is the elevation of the front of George Street. So this is again number 13, and this is the bit where it drops in height as it wraps around the corner currently. And this is the proposed elevation with the mansard roof that you can see here that the gap is maintained between the building as it turns the corner and number 13. And again, this is the roof plan of that, of the area we just looked at. So number 13 here, the proposed roof plan, sorry, that's the existing roof plan, but you can see the gap there. And you can see here that this, with the mansard roof and the proposed development, that gap is maintained. And I don't know if members can see, there's an existing window here, and there's the 45-degree line, just to show that there would be no overlooking from that. This is the existing elevation at the front, the high street, and you can see that's the listed building. And there is condition, obviously the building is attached to the listed building, and so officers have requested a condition which has been agreed by the applicants for a method statement as to how that building will be demolished and constructed to avoid any adverse impact on that listed building. And that would be the proposed front elevation. So you can see, as previously noted, it is similar in height and has similar proportions with a larger ground floor, and the hierarchy of windows getting smaller as the building rises up. And that's the existing roof plan. So this is number 70 here, and the proposed, the existing roof plan of numbers 60 to 68, or the end of 68. And again, this is the proposed roof plan, and you can see again the windows here, the red sort of outlines and the 45-degree lines, and that's the window that you'd have seen at the end of that rear extension on number 70. So again, it avoids blocking and overlooking to those windows. That's the existing rear elevation of number 70 again, and the existing building. And this is the relationship you'd get there with the proposed development. So it is again showing that there would be no adverse impact on the existing windows in number 70, and this bit is a rear projection which projects further back than the proposed building will. So this is the George Street elevation as proposed on top, and this is the High Street elevation. So just to cover off some points, it's taken, in our officer's opinion, an unsympathetic building that's in the conservation, a highly prominent corner location, and turning it into something that has a bit of flair and design. It, to some extent, brings back the sort of development that was traditionally on that corner, which was smaller sort of terraced units that turned the corner. It has traditional proportions. It has traditional materials, brick, render and slate proposed. Comments have been made, obviously, about the mix of units and the lack of affordability. A viability assessment was submitted to the council, and obviously members have seen the assessment from the independent assessor on that, and it was found that with the contribution to a provision of affordable, it would not be viable, and the mix of units, if they were to change the mix of units, it would be unlikely to be viable. But we do have a unilateral undertaking which gives the SAM contribution and the contributions requested by KCC, as well as the contribution for the NHS CCG contribution and an open space contribution to off-site provision, as well as providing a small area of open space on the application site itself. So on balance, members, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. I move the officer's recommendation, which you've heard is for approval. The Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Right, a few hands going up. Bear with me. Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a swathe of things to say about the development. Firstly, I'd like confirmation on the High Street scene where the buildings are abutting at the moment. Obviously, there'll be some kind of party wall agreement, and on the new development, it will be a seamless joint again, so that there's a seamless flow from the existing building to the new one. Secondly, I have to agree with quite a few of the comments that Councillor Austin said, in the fact that what it's being presented, what's being put forward is a complete transformation of that area of the High Street, which is only going to improve it, and it's very difficult to do adaptation on an existing building. It can be more costly. So what the developer and the owner have put forward, I think, is very good. The negativity, which again Councillor Austin said, is that one-bedroom apartments are passé. You meet someone, you two people live in a one-bedroom flat, inevitable happens, you have children, you have to move because you haven't got that additional room. And I don't think there's a right mix with one bedrooms and two bedrooms. I'd like to see more two bedrooms in the development. So on that basis, I wouldn't be able to agree to the recommendation because I don't think there's a correct mixture of affordable apartments. And the last question is, are there any social properties in this one for the number of properties that are being developed? Are some being given to social housing, or is it all for people to buy? So those are my sort of questions, if I've got it in the right order. Thank you, Chair.
Can you... Yep. Oh, coming over to Ian.
So I'm just going to come back on the question of mix. And so there's no affordable housing in the site. So in terms of what you're referring to in terms of social rent, so properties go to RSLs, there's no on-site provision of affordable housing or off-site contribution. And so that's dealt with in the report by virtue of the viability appraisal that's been done. This is obviously, members, we've talked about this a number of times, this has been looked at, and specifically we've looked at the point to do with profit levels. So I know this has been a concern that members have raised previously. The profit projection for the developer in this instance in the appraisal is 15% on gross development value, which is the lowest end of the 15 to 20% that is cited in the MPPG and the government guidance on this. In terms of values on the site, it's come in over the amount that's found in the local area, but Councillor Austin's pointed out there's no precise comparable, but it has come over. The values have been put above that. But fundamentally, the issue with this site relates to both build costs and also the comparison with the benchmark land value, which obviously it's a commercial site, it attracts a certain value at the moment, and therefore any what's left residual land value after the viability assessment has to be compared to that benchmark land value, and it simply wouldn't stack up, therefore, to have affordable housing on site, which reduces obviously the amount of GDV that comes in as opposed to market units. That does have a knock-on impact with the argument about mix, because obviously the mix that's been proposed indeed does have a higher proportion of one-bedroom units than the strategic housing market assessment for the whole local plan would look for. Policy SP22 specifically talks about needing to justify flats as a greater proportion of development rather than, for example, houses. In this instance, obviously, it's been shown that the development can just about make it through and be deliverable, providing some contributions, but no affordable housing on site on the basis of the units that have been shown. If units were to reduce or change in proportion, obviously, if you create a two-bed unit, you're going to lose one bed to do that, then the site becomes even less viable. And obviously, in this instance, there are two big things in support of the application in our view. One is the impact on the conservation area and the beneficial impact. There's also the fact that the government guidance is very clear in the NPPF about effective use of brownfield sites, developing it for high density development, which, and the wording is specific in the NPPF, a substantial weight should be given to those sorts of proposals. Given the council's position with regards to 5-year supply, it does therefore weigh quite heavily on that. To Councillor Moore's point with regards to impact on the listed building, it was mentioned by Annabelle in terms of a condition specifically about how are they going to demolish that building and construct the new building up against it. It's not quite flush because the building at the moment isn't flush adjacent to it, so it will match the footprint of the existing building in terms of that relationship with the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Rattigan.
Yeah, I've got a nursery school down the road from there, and it's quite sad seeing the building sort of empty. I agree with the officers. I mean, there is a property opposite there that was, I think the council made them build that one, or I don't know, opposite which they've completely rebuilt and looks very good. Again, you know, we're going back to our previous case where we're saying we've got no developers that are willing to put money into the area, and I think this is a nice scheme, so I would be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. Rather like Councillor Austin has said, this is got mixed reviews to it. Just to put this into context of where this site is, it is right on the edge of the area where parking is not required to be a consideration. There's an awful lot of properties within it. I think it's 39. We can't stop people having cars. Even if half of the people have got cars, that's 20 cars. Meeting Street car park was referred to, and it's extremely close, and I agree. But if you put 20 cars in there, you filled half that car park. That is a dinky little car park at best. Although this is in a town centre, you're talking about a 10-minute walk to the nearest supermarkets. That is Waitrose, Iceland, Aldi. And you're talking about an uphill walk back. There are no buses. Unfortunately, I'm saying these things, and I know I can see it in your expression on your face. I know these are not reasons to turn down an application, but they are exactly as the applicant has said. This is a national problem. But we are seeing our town centre in Ramsgate increasingly residential. And it's not just this site, it's what we've already referred to as the top of the High Street and all down King Street. And it is becoming a major problem that we've just approved one in Margate with 10 parking spaces. And I'm just really massively disappointed, and I needed to have my say, so thank you very much. I do appreciate the whole thing, you've said it before, brownfield sites in town centre, any brownfield site is harder to achieve the affordable housing. I understand that. It's unfortunate, but I get it. And yeah, it's okay. I mean, I've got used to the old buildings being there, but we are turning Ramsgate Town Centre into a residential area, and we are not taking account of it. And yes, we have got car parks, but there are no buses.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I disagree about the lack of need of one-bed flats. I think we do need them. I think we attract business people, single people, and we build lots of beautiful homes for families. I think there is also a need for one-bed flats. I think this is very attractive. I think it's very good use of the land, a great improvement. I thoroughly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Wing.
I'm not going to go over what Councillor Austin said, because obviously we share the ward, so I agree with everything she says, but I get quite annoyed with this based on need. we're not basing anything on need, we're basing things on profit often. We commissioned a report that in 2021 that actually pointed out, I found it on a Google search actually, but it was commissioned by TDC, and the growth in our population is going to be 10% up to 2040, and the main driver is going to be over 65s, which surprised me, but it was a report we commissioned. So one of the questions I'm going to ask is, are there any disability or age-proofed units within this development? Overall, I admire this developer for trying to repurpose the town centre, because the big empty retail units are being left, and we need to do something. And overall, I think this is a positive development. I'd also like to quote the local plan again, as I always do. For 116 people that work in Thanet, 100 of them have to travel outside of the area to work. We don't have the sort of public transport that would exist in London boroughs. You know, you can't even get direct to Canterbury very often. So people, and although I would like people not to have cars, the reality is people have to have cars to work. The other issue I'm finding as a ward councillor in another large development off Effingham Street was the over-purchase of these units to be turned into Airbnbs. In one part of the Effingham Street development, I think there were 40 units, 30 of them were being operated as an Airbnb. So what I would try and encourage the developer to do, to put some sort of condition that properties can't be sublet for Airbnbs. It happens in other buildings. We stop that. The permanent residents that are living in there, their lives are being blighted by a constant turnover of very often young people coming into our town. So I think they're the main questions. The parking is a big one. Can we at least have some parking? Most developments of this size have at least some parking as a token. I agree with the developer that we need political solutions, and I'm looking forward very much to the parking survey that's been promised for the last 6 months following the motion that was proposed. And I know this particular developer has offered some exciting solutions involving some of our own assets that would help the parking issues. We are the second most dense area, Thanet, behind Dartford. Dartford's not surrounded by sea on 3 sides. And I know my ward, Central Harbour, is amongst one of the most dense in Thanet. So we really need to think seriously about future issues. So to go over, are there any disability or age-proof residence units in there? I would like to see at least some parking there as a token at least. And I can't think what the other one was. Airbnbs, that's a real vital one that we try, and the developer, I suppose I'm appealing to the developer here because it's not a condition we can have, but please. Also, is it managed? So bins are going to be taken to one place. So is this going to be a site that is going to have a management company looking after it? So making sure that those bins go out to the store and then come back, because if there isn't, we all know those bins are not going to go there. Thank you, sorry.
Don't worry. Thank you, Councillor Wing.
Yes,
Annabelle.
in terms of, I'll try and hopefully answer them in the same order. In terms of accessible and adaptable units, there are a requirement for 4 units to actually be provided, and that's been agreed. But there is also a lift, so some of the other units that aren't necessarily going to be the accessible, adaptable units can be accessed. Now, I don't think that we can make them provide parking. There isn't any real outdoor space. The space that is there is sort of housing the amenity space that's being proposed, and that's a benefit which you wouldn't normally get in these sorts of locations. And in terms of the refuse, there's not a sort of management flat on site or something like that, but there is a team that will come down and take the bins, put the bins out and bring them back in on the days, yes, so they're just not left out on site. So it's not a resident's responsibility.
Thank you, Annabelle. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it is obviously visually an improvement on what's there, and to that extent it's to be welcomed. I don't have a problem with it in terms of it being overdevelopment. I do share the concerns that have been expressed about the number of one-bed units. But the reason that we've got so much residential coming into our town centre, apart from the fact that it's thought to be a good thing in terms of creating thriving town centres, is that there is a declining demand for retail. And one of the questions, which is for our policies really and not for this planning application, is whether we should be requiring retail on that site at this point. And I don't know what the demand for those retail units is. I'm sure the developer has got a better idea than me, and that they're more suitable than what's there at the moment. But obviously it's our policy which is keeping those retail units at ground floor. Possibly if they weren't retail units, the building would be more viable, and then we might get some social housing. So all these things are balances that we have to draw. On the whole, there isn't a shortage of parking in the town centre. I accept that the Meeting Street car park is particularly small, and that people who bring cars will have to pay to park their cars, which they'll do in council car parks, which is obviously not a bad thing from the council's point of view, but is an additional cost for them. So I should be supporting the application. I do so with a heavy heart because I don't like supporting schemes that don't have any social housing in them. But fundamentally the problem with social housing is caused by government policy. We need to build more social housing and not depend just on developers to provide it. So I don't think we can blame this particular developer for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Everett. Councillor Downing, yes, I've got your label.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very interesting, attractive development, and with a mixed use of retail and housing, I feel that it's a good thing for Ramsgate. As far as the mix goes, I mean, you know, it's the best they're making of that building, and they're actually producing enough residential requirements in the area. I mean, it's interesting to hear Councillor Austin talking about parking. Well, you know, I mean, you can't have it both ways. I mean, they don't like cars on the road, so they don't need parking, you know, so there is no need for parking because there won't be any over here. So we don't have that issue with worrying about pollution and other things on this particular area. And I would certainly recommend that we approve this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downing. Councillor Crittenden, you want to come back? No, we don't. Okay. No more speakers. And I did see you that time. All right. Righto, members, I'm going to put this to you. It is recommended for approval. Will you please show if you're in favour? Those against? One against. Abstentions? That has been carried. Thank you very much, members. That brings us to a close of the Planning Committee this evening. Can I thank you, members, officers, long meeting, but yep. And take care till the next time. Good night.